Alright folks, so today we're going to be reviewing some Ben Shapiro streams. As you can see, he's got 12k viewers right now. So far, a fairly milquetoast speech, but we got some spicy live chat. Very Groyper. Very cringe. So yeah, basically so far, just basically conservative boilerplate from Shapiro, while the chat goes crazy. The main event will be when the Q&A starts, and we'll see what the Fuentes faction has to say. Let's see. Nasty. Looks like he's got them in his sights. That's right. The ones who call themselves the New Right seem to mostly be alt-light, kind of in the same camp as Shapiro, I thought. Uh-oh. I think I see a problem. Yeah, I'm seeing an issue where the stream is not actually giving audio. Oh, that's so annoying. Audio.
Term, because civilization is not defined by color, but by history and culture and philosophy.
Okay.
Well, let's say that you say white civilization is under attack by multiracial hordes.
Right.
Let's say that you're antipathetic toward Jews. You're enraged by the liberties guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States.
I think I might have to restart the stream.
You spend your days ranting about how conservatives and traditional classical liberals, the sole protective force in America against the radical left, haven't conserved anything. America is not a propositional or a creedal nation, even though the nation's founding literally begins with the words, "Behold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights."
Disconnect.
Let's say that you cite Christianity as the basis of your values, but you're more likely to quote Nietzsche than Christ. Let's say that you constantly lament the decline of our fundamental institutions, but you don't belong to a church, you don't belong to a bowling league, you don't belong to the Lions Club, you don't belong to the Rotary Club, you don't own a home, you don't have a grown-up job, you probably aren't married, you probably aren't a parent. Let's say that your greatest achievement in life isn't family, kids, church, community, but that you once made a semi-ironic meme that 7 other people like you upvoted on Telegram. Turns out not all that many Americans agree with you. After all, your agenda is pretty disgusting. You also happen to have the unfortunate habit of saying really disgusting things when you think other people aren't listening. For example, your thought leaders, your self-proclaimed lead influencers, will say they're not on the same page as white supremacist Richard Spencer,
Hey, Fletcher.
but then they'll go on Facebook
Hey,
and
Fletcher,
post
what's
about
up?
the Charlottesville white supremacist rally, quote, "The rootless transnational elite know that a tidal wave of white identity is
Ben's
coming,
annihilated.
and they know that once the word gets out, they will not be able to stop us. The fire rises." Really hiding the ball there, are you? Let's say that your self-proclaimed lead influencer has compared Alex Jones's ban from social media, a ban, by the way, which I opposed publicly, to a modern Kristallnacht and the beginning of a white Holocaust. But when it comes to the Holocaust itself, you have some questions. You do. Right? Those questions are questions like this. This is a direct quote from a lead influencer in the alt-right. Matt says, "If I take 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies and Cookie Monster has 15 ovens working 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years, how long does it take Cookie Monster to make 6 million batches of cookies?" I don't know. That's a good question. No, that doesn't sound really correct to me. Wait a second. It takes 1 hour to build a batch of cookies, and you have 15 ovens, probably in 4 different kitchens, right, doing 24 hours a day for 5 years. How long would it take to get to 6 million? I don't know. It certainly wouldn't be 5 years, right? The math doesn't seem to add up there. None of it really adds up. None of it really makes sense. This crazy cookie analogy. 6 million cookies? No, I don't buy it. That's all irony.
I think
I'm
it
an
is the
irony
best
bro.
approach,
That's
actually,
all irony.
Fletcher. Like, you can't
This is the
dodge
kind of
around
stuff
this.
some of these folks are saying. For the record, by the way, just so the facts are on the record, according to Henrik Tauber, a member of the Sonder Commando who worked in several of Birkenau's gas chambers, quote, "We worked in 2 shifts, a day shift and a night shift. On average, we incinerated 2,500 bodies a day. The procedure was to put the first body with the feet toward the muffle, back down and face up. Then a second body was placed on top, again face up, but head toward the muffle. We had to work fast. The bodies put in first soon started to burn. Their arms and legs rose up. Women's bodies burned much better and more quickly than those of men. For this reason, when a charge was burning badly, we would introduce a woman's body to accelerate the combustion," unquote. But maybe he was just being ironic, bro. In fact, it seems like some members of the alt-right, they have a pretty large problem with Jews generally. They'll tweet things like, quote, "So-called Jewish values tend to favor liberal and internationalist positions like abortion, foreign intervention, multiculturalism, homosexuality, and mass immigration." Some of you will say that you're hurt in your daily existence by Jews. You suggested that a religious Catholic who writes for my website, a guy named Matt Walsh, is a, quote, Shabbos Goy race traitor who's throwing his own people under the bus and hates white people. In fact,
Yeah,
Walsh
he's
is,
basically
according
taking
to
aim
you,
at
an
these
F-word, that would
folks
be for gay
directly,
people.
and that's
P-word, as in female genitalia,
in my
a
opinion,
race
certainly
traitor
the
who
best
works for the
approach.
Jews. What prompted that outburst, by the way, on the part of this alt-right lead influencer? The fact that my friend, Matt Walsh, said that the El Paso racist shooter should be publicly executed in brutal fashion. Also, it turns out, lead influencers in the alt-right not so fond of black people either. One particular lead influencer, when asked if having sex with a dog is the same thing as having sex with a black man, said, quote, "They would both be degenerate." Really, really classy people. So, when you believe all these garbage things, and you've said all these garbage things, and you are in fact a garbage human being, when your views are obviously white supremacist garbage, what do? You take 4 steps in order to legitimize yourself. Step number 1, the Trump gambit. First, you declare your allegiance to President Trump, and declare that you're not really alt-right, even though you obviously are. You show up to lectures wearing a MAGA hat in order to get the media to cover it, and in order to demonstrate that you are truly a representative of the 63 million Trump voters.
He's naming them.
You call yourself
naming them
America
directly.
First, hijacking Trump's slogan, but what you actually mean is white Americans first. The media eat it up because the media love nothing better than, of course, lumping Trump in with particularly this group. You don't have to take my word for it. You can just ask Andrew Anglin, the neo-Nazi who runs the Daily Stormer. He posted a calendar of events for alt-righters to attend and attack, including this particular event. And he wrote last week, quote, "I think basically we've got a model going forward that is going to work. If we get questions, we'll take questions, but simply being there and heckling in the audience relentlessly is extremely effective. And you can meet other like-minded people there this way as well. Remember, we're all good optics, American nationalists now. Longtime readers will remember this is something I pushed very hard while others were dressing up in neo-Nazi costumes. And by talking about these issues instead of saying, gas the kikes or whatever, we are more or less immune to being fired or kicked out of school if doxxed. You just, if somebody calls you alt-right, you say, no, of course I'm not an alt-right, neo-Nazi, racist, white supremacist. I'm just an America First nationalist and a MAGA supporter. Now, this is a clever tactic. It is. Donald Trump is many things. He is not a white supremacist, and he is not an anti-Semite. His daughter is an Orthodox Jew, so is his son-in-law, so are all of his policy advisors, or at least many of his policy advisors with regard to the Middle East. Donald Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem in a bold move of solidarity with the people of Israel. He has a roundabout named for him in Jerusalem.
Christ is king, no matter what Shapiro says.
Trump is named for him in the Golan Heights.
Why are you a gay?
Donald Trump has nothing to do with these so-called self-proclaimed America First asshats.
Alt-right.
In fact, he's very close to one of the people they attack the most, Charlie Kirk. Right? Donald Trump regularly invites Charlie to official meetings in the Oval Office. But, you know, these people bought some MAGA hats, so the left will spread their lie, and they know it. which
Yep.
is why, again, they're encouraging people to wear MAGA hats to events.
In
So
practical terms,
be on
they're a
the
tool
lookout.
for the left.
Doesn't mean everyone with a MAGA
These
hat
pathetic
is an alt-righter,
assholes.
obviously.
All they can do
what I'm
is
saying
fuck
is that
up
the
the
vast
right.
majority of people who wear MAGA hats
They're no
are
threat
not
to the left.
alt-righters. I'm saying the alt-right is looking to disguise themselves specifically for purposes of publicity. Okay, step 2.
Yep.
Then you declare yourself the true conservatives, the true heirs to conservatism. Right? Not a bunch of masturbating losers who live in your mother's basement. No, you're the true heirs of conservatism. The way you do this is that you simply lie about mainstream conservatives. You suggest that mainstream conservatives are insufficiently committed to social conservatism. So, one of the things that all these people have been planning to do the last several weeks is they show up in the Q&A lines and they ask the same 9 questions. So I'm just going to knock down these questions right now, and then we can actually have a real Q&A with real questions.
Good approach.
Saves us time on the other end.
Look how unhappy they are. These fucking losers.
So they've been showing up to events and asking people like my friend Dan Crenshaw, Republican of Texas and former Navy SEAL. A question.
Looks like a lefty intervention here. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Ben Shapiro's got to go.
I have one question. Are you protesting the part where I'm condemning the Nazis?
Yeah.
Like, you hear what I'm doing right now. Do you have ears? I'm literally condemning Nazis, and you're telling me to leave. Do you hear yourselves?
That's the left for you. Yep.
Nah.
Left doesn't care if you condemn Nazis. They think you're a crypto-Nazi.
Adding to the public discourse.
Hey, Josh, good to see you. You should just ignore them and move on with
Switch
the
it
speech.
up. We heard this one. Keep going. Different one. Come on. Anytime. Switch it up.
Although, if he has time, he could just milk this and get more viewers from the drama. That's optics, right there. Yeah, this is live mic.
All right. Okay. Okay.
Look at the response
You know what?
of
Okay,
the filth
good news. I have a microphone
in the
and
chat.
speakers.
Israel,
And,
Israel. They're really for
You
Israel.
know, it turns out
These
that in my daily
fucking
life,
cucks
I deal with 2 screaming children
Respond
under
to
the
a
age of 6
USA
every
chant
single
that
day.
way.
So,
That's how pathetic these people are.
dealing with 7 screaming protesters who are significantly less smart than my 5-year-old and my
Zog.
3-year-old
This
is
is
really
Zog.
not that much of a challenge.
They hate America.
Alrighty, so,
They call America Zog.
goodbye. In the words of President Trump, bye-bye.
Get fucked.
I gotta be honest with you, I'm extraordinarily puzzled. I'm standing up here bashing the living shit out of Nazis, and they're telling me I have to leave over it. What's a guy gotta do? Yeah, I noticed. Okay, so back to, we're gonna get rid of all these questions so we don't have to deal with them in the Q&A. So a lot of these alt-righters have been showing up at various events, and they've been asking questions like, how does anal sex help us win the culture war? Really, this is the thing they've been asking. I mean, I'm not sure how them masturbating to pictures of frogs helps win the culture war either, but
I'm not sure their
purpose is to
obsession with
simultaneously pose as
homosexuality
edgy
helps win
and
the
also
culture
to
war.
preserve your ability to say that you were joking. But the goal is really to suggest that if you oppose the alt-right, you're in favor of destroying the traditional family, which is ridiculous. Now, the actual answer, the non-snarky answer to this ridiculous question, is that criminalizing consensual activity without externalities is by definition losing the culture war. Okay, what helps America win the culture
Yep,
war
Mike,
is freedom
Ben's really good at
and
this.
liberty, and the government not being involved in your life. And if you, like me, believe that certain
18K
personal
viewers
activity
and
is a
rising,
sin, you know how
or
you win
18-ish.
that culture war? By having people join your church, by engaging with your community, by teaching your children your values. That's the way you win a culture war. In fact, I'm bewildered by it. There's great irony in watching alt-righters claim they should use the commanding heights of government to cram down their viewpoints on others, while complaining that the left uses the commanding heights of government to cram down their viewpoints on others. You can't really whine about using the government to shut down your viewpoint when you plan on using the government to shut down everybody else's viewpoint.
Yep. Steps right on the face of their own argument.
But many
they're
folks
not
on the
deep
alt-right
thinkers.
are busy playing true believers by suggesting that social conservatives like me People who wrote entire books on the evils of pornography in American society, or people like David French, who spend their days fighting for religious freedom in court, are standing ardently in favor of Drag Queen Story Hour at the local library. Okay, newsflash. I think Drag Queen Story Hour is border on child abuse. I think parents who expose young children to sexualized cross-dressing adults are doing something wrong and bad. I also think that in governmental terms, if you allow the library to decide which speech to ban, it's much more likely to ban the Bible than Drag Queen Story Hour. I'm for limited government because I do not trust the government to decide what kind of speech it wants to ban. Okay, so now I'm going to knock down a few of their Q&A questions about me personally. We can go through these real quick because I don't really care about them. First, they claim that I hate Jesus. Okay, I'm a Jew. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't mean to be facetious about this, but this is obvious that I don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. You see, I have a hat. It says the whole thing, truly. With that said, I'm really, really glad that Christians do. Really glad that Christians do. I mean actual Christians, not the fake Christians who quote Nietzsche but don't know anything about the Gospel of John. I mean the kind who go to church and seek God's grace and love their neighbors. I'm very, very happy that America is largely a Christian nation. I wish it were more so. I think American-style Christianity is one of the best things to ever happen to civilization. Ever.
Yeah, Mike, there's going to be a Q&A, and presumably that's when the back and forth is going to happen.
My best friend and business partner is a lay minister. I employ tons of Christians. I've given them the freedom and the platform to share their faith. I've written one of the best-selling conservative books of all time that basically calls for more conservatives to go back to church and argues for the value of biblical religion. Okay, a couple more of these. They say that I want America to fight wars for Israel. Nope. First of all, Israel can take care of herself. They say that I'm a chicken hawk. I want to send our boys to die, but I won't fight myself. Okay, reality. People who join the military are braver than I. They've sacrificed more than I. That is a fact. Also a fact. No one in America sends people to die. People volunteer for our military. The draft has not been in effect for several decades. The people who join our military, they're not victims, and nothing annoys them more than being treated as victims.
The Doves act like it's Vietnam after Vietnam, and it's pathetic.
They don't need protection from me. I, like every other American, I have opinions on how to use the American military because we have civilian control of the military here in the United States, which is a very, very good thing. But suggesting that anybody who doesn't serve in the military can't have an opinion about the use of the military is like suggesting that anybody who is not a police officer can't have opinions about how the police ought to be used.
True.
By the way, our soldiers don't need the victimology, the sort of patting on the back of a bunch of weak, effeminate losers who live in mom's basement. They are protecting you. They are stronger than you. Okay, other ones. I attacked the Covington kids. I mean, this one is so absurd. I literally was on the phone with the Covington. I know them personally. I was on the phone with them nearly every night, guiding them in the media and through legal strategy. Okay, I haven't revealed that publicly until now, but now that this accusation is out there, I may as well say it. You can call them, you can ask them. Okay, they also suggest, these folks, that I didn't defend so-and-so when they were banned from social media. That's probably a lie. I've basically defended everyone from being banned from social media, including people who have targeted me and created risk threats for me. Okay, another one they like, that I'm a grifter, right, that I make money. Welcome to America. We have lots of sponsors. I'm very grateful for my sponsors. And I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I offer my sponsors a way to reach my audience. I'm very proud of them. I think their products are good. That's why I talk about them.
You know why they're mad? Not because Ben Shapiro makes money, but because they don't.
I'm out to make money. I like money. Congratulations. It's a free market economy. Okay, now to a few of their more policy-based claims. When you aren't lying about me or Matt Walsh or Charlie Kirk or David French or Dan Crenshaw, these folks are busy playing defender of the realm by suggesting that all immigration be shut down on the basis of race. Not on the basis of economics, on the basis of race. Let's be clear, every country has the right and duty to defend its borders. I was for a Trump wall before Trump was for a Trump wall. But legal immigration has been overall, not always, but overall, a massive boon to the United States. In periods in which it is not, that's because government has basically failed to take into account economic, education, and cultural status of new immigrants. The government should take all those factors into account. Again, economic, educational, and cultural status, all of that should be taken into account. And then we should welcome new immigrants who benefit the United States. This is all very logical. By the way, I'm confused by the idea that we should not be attempting to create a brain drain to the United States by drawing immigrants who are highly qualified here. If you're America first, why don't you want more smart, principled people coming into the United States to make us stronger and simultaneously drain other countries?
But this is solidly to the right in American politics on immigration.
Then you get the questions about Israel and suggesting that if you're pro-Israel, this means prioritizing America over Israel. That's absolute nonsense. If America had a policy that was not good for Israel but was good for America, I would back it. They talk about the USS Liberty incident.
That's good that he said that directly.
U.S. Navy, Joint Chiefs of Staff, CIA, House, Senate, NSA. Most of the reports, according to historian Richard Brownell, do not assign culpability for the incident. They focus on communications failures. I have to say, I'm a little bit bewildered why you're so obsessed with an incident that is now 52 years old. If you have theories that are better than those of the American government, they've got operators standing by. Feel free to dial them and tell them about your 5-decade-old theories about a military incident from the 1967 Six-Day War. It's of direct and vital interest now in 2019.
Yep, that's what people are obsessed with.
Speaking
What
of
happened to the Liberty?
Europe, they tend to say that they like white European ideals, not Western ideals. Western ideals would be a thing, right? Because you can read about Western ideals in books. White European ideals. I'm wondering exactly
Mike,
what they're talking
he decided
about.
to basically change his speech to address the alt-right
or Judeo-Christian
directly.
ideals, which I talk about.
Or Fuentes
Instead,
directly, as it were.
They talk about white European ideals. I'm confused what are white ideals? What do white ideals look like? Do white ideals look like, like the professors at these universities who are overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly socialist? What do white ideals look like? How about European ideals, like the socialists over in various parts of Europe? Are you really happy with how Germany's being governed right now, are you? Like, what do European ideals look like to you? Do the white communists at Berkeley have these white European ideals? Race does not have ideals. It's just a melanin level. Okay? It's just a skin color or a place of origin. If you think it does, you are absolutely indistinguishable.
It's not just
You are
a melanin
identical
level,
to the
Ben.
identity politics left, to the intersectional left. Spoiler alert, the alt-right is. And then the alt-righters talk about how white people are superior to others, but their own idiocy and bigotry demonstrates that isn't true. They talk about the demographic shift in the country is ruinous. They point to the fact that
It's
non-white
not
folk
just
tend to
melanin.
vote Democrat, but this ignores
But
that
people
voting
who
is
make their
malleable.
whole
The
identity
fact is
based on
that
their
a huge
race
percentage of California
are those who
Hispanics vote
benefit
for
from doing
Democrats.
that,
80% of
meaning
Florida
those without
Hispanics
much achievement.
currently favor Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Okay, Hispanics don't vote universally one way because race is not the basis for voting. Ethnicity is not the basis for voting. Culture may be the basis for voting, but ethnicity is not. Race is not. Again, that is an uncontrollable factor. Culture is a different thing. That affects how people think. But none of this is about reality. Okay, so we have step one, and that is you masquerade as a MAGA-nick. And then we have step two, and that is you claim that you're the true believer. And then we have step three, which is to troll, right? You just show up at places like this, and you say dumb things, then you tell all your friends how cool you are.
Alex DeLarge says in the chat, Jews do that, meaning Jews boil their identity down to their Jewishness.
Funnier than that,
Well, no.
honestly. I mean, that's just good stuff.
Jews care about their
And then
achievement.
finally, and this
That's
is
a very
big one,
Jewish
you
thing.
count on the left to help you out.
Why aren't
This
you
is
a
where
doctor?
this
Why aren't you a
various
lawyer?
lines that I've been talking about between the
The idea that
alt-right
being
and the
proud
hardcore left
of Judaism
comes in.
means it's
And
enough
believe you me,
to be a
the radical
Jew
left will.
is
I mean,
exactly
we've
the
seen proof of it
opposite
here
of the
tonight.
case.
I'm here decrying
Being a Jew raises
for
the
40
bar.
minutes the evils of the alt-right and white supremacism. And there are people up there calling me an alt-right white supremacist.
Whereas white nationalists,
Okay, the left
they
will literally call
try
anybody
to
on the right
obviate
alt-right,
their
even if we say
failures
vocally and
with
in
their
no uncertain
race.
terms that the alt-right is
They're
pure,
exactly the
unbridled,
opposite
vile
of the
garbage.
attitude the Jews take.
Even if members of the alt-right target those people on the mainstream right, even if Donald Trump condemns the worldview. Listen, you can argue with anything mainstream conservatives say. It's a free country. We disagree with each other pretty frequently, but there's no doubt that mainstream conservatives are pretty easily distinguishable from the alt-right.
19K
but it doesn't
people,
matter, the
Mike.
media will lie about this anyway. So the
19K
Boston Globe
people online.
will call my website, The Daily Wire, an alt-right outpost. We force them to recant. The Economist will call me the alt-right sage without the rage. We'll force them to recant. Over at Boston University, where I'm speaking next week, they're festooning.
I don't think you're a
posters of my
race
face with
worshiper,
Hitler
Alex.
mustache, which makes
I think you're
perfect
just
sense.
not understanding that the alt-right is, and the Fuentes
Students
faction
at this
is.
university will mob people trying to put up posters for a lecture. They'll tear down banners advertising the speech and replace it with a banner reading, "Be tolerant, accept racism." I challenge you to find anything in this speech or anything else I have said that is racist. Really, I'm waiting. Operators on standby. They'll issue a flyer that literally depicts me as a cockroach on a bottle of bug spray with the label "Ben Be Gone." I do love that one, I will say. That was pretty great. I think that my favorite thing about that is that these people, they hear dog whistles everywhere. Right? Donald Trump will say something and they will, "Oh, it's a dog whistle." I say Judeo-Christian values. And then they say, "Oh, that's a dog whistle." When I say Judeo-Christian values, I mean white people. Which is obviously untrue. Dog whistles everywhere, just dog whistles everywhere. And then they put out a poster literally with an Orthodox Jew on a bottle of extermination spray with me as a bug. That's not a dog whistle. That's you howling at the moon. I mean, my God. And then they're like, oh, well, we just didn't know. Funny, your antenna were up real high in terms of sensitivity for other groups. Weird that your antenna were just completely non-functional when it came to the Jews who don't rank on your intersectional hierarchy of victimhood. Very odd. For every other group, we have to be careful of dog whistles that don't even make sense. When it comes to the Jews, you're like, I'll put him on a bottle of Bug Be Gone, this Jew right here. Maybe I have a feeling it might be because, unfortunately, for the intersectional left, Jews don't actually count as a quote-unquote minority group. Right? The only minority groups are the ones that they perceive are victimized. Jews aren't victimized enough, despite the fact that on a per capita basis, Jews are the most victimized group in the United States by hate crimes. And it isn't particularly
Jews have less of a protection than
but it's not just the
more
students at this university.
unambiguously
The media will suggest that President Trump is in league with the alt-right.
groups.
Even at this late date, they'll neglect the fact that Trump has repeatedly condemned white supremacism, that he has purged his administration of people who were remotely friendly with the alt-right, people like Steve Bannon.
That's it. They're not in the same position as Gentiles in that
regard.
regard.
They'll declare that the MAGA hat is indeed a Nazi swastika. So, clarification for people on the left who apparently can't listen or read. If someone believes that all men are created equal, and men means like mankind, that's what the word meant when it was written in the Declaration of Independence, you idiots. If someone believes that all men are created equal, that every American should have equality before the law, in free market capitalism, in small government, in equal rights for people of all races, that person is not on the alt-right. In fact, they despise the alt-right, and the alt-right despises them. But people on the left know this.
Yeah, Chris, I stand by what I said.
Why? Because their goal is to delegitimize the entire right. The goal is to smear the entire right with the label alt-right, to shut the Overton window to everybody who's anywhere to the right of Hillary Clinton. That's precisely why the New York Times splashed a photo collage on their front page of me and Milton Friedman and Dave Rubin and Richard Spencer. The goal was to lump everybody together and then suggest that we are radicalizing the American population, as though Richard Spencer and I have a damn thing in common. For the first thing, I can read. Political correctness is a weapon for the left, but it's also a weapon for the alt-right. Harvard professor Steven Pinker, who the left tried to cancel for saying this, made this clear last year. He was saying that political correctness is a way for the left to shut down debate. By shutting down debate, they actually open the door to the alt-right because they say you can't ask certain questions. Then the questions get asked, they shut it down, and people go, wait, I'll just look online for the answer, and the first answer they find might be something from an alt-right website, and they start to take it more seriously, right? This is something Steven Pinker said, so the left called him alt-right and shut him down.
Hell yeah, ultra testosterone.
There's something that's the most nefarious of all when it comes to these sort of de facto playing off each other political lines between the far left and the alt-right, and that is that they actually mirror themselves in politics and culture. They both have an identity politics view. As I say, the left's view of American politics is that Americans can be identified by group. Americans are black or Hispanic or white or green or Jewish or lesbian or, in the best of all possible worlds, a half Native American, half black, little person who is gender fluid. Right? If you're on the left, you don't describe people by their belief system or by what they do. You describe them by their attributes. You describe them by group attributes. And they have a whole intersectional hierarchy deciding
Ben Shapiro pointing out how the alt-right depends on the left.
The only difference between the left and the alt-right is that they reverse the hierarchy, meaning that the left thinks that hierarchy is bad. Right? They create this hierarchy where white people are the most powerful, and then progressively you go all the way down to the bottom and you get to the LGBT people, and those are the people who are the least powerful according to this hierarchy. And they say that
testosterone. Ultimately, this is representative of their function, which is to distract and demoralize the actual right wing.
There shouldn't be a hierarchy. What the hell are you talking about? We're individuals. We live in a free country.
Goddamn right. Fuentes started this shit. As if Ben started it. Fuentes and the alt-right started this shit. A long time ago. Ben's ending it.
And we should also be able to see the difference between good, fact-based, rational answers and identity politics bullshit pandering, which is a specialty, unfortunately, of both the radical left and the alt-right. But the left won't have the conversation. The alt-right really doesn't want to either. They prefer memeing and trolling and all the rest. So, here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Anyone on the right or left who wants to have an actual conversation about tough issues, that isn't the bumper sticker, but is also not willing to pretend that ugly bigotry is decency, or that identity politics reflects truth, or that trollish memeing is a substitute for an actual worldview. Let's have the conversation. Thanks so much. Happy to take your questions.
Oh, a lot of question time left. A lot of question time.
Thank you, everyone. It's time to start the question and answer period. If you'd like to ask a question, please walk around to the back of the hall, back of the house. Stand behind the pink line by the usher, and he will guide you up to ask a question. Everyone gets a maximum of one question.
Yeah.
Hey Ben,
Question and
thank
answer
you
will be
for coming
interesting.
here to campus. So I have a question. Many Jews don't like defining Jews as an ethnicity because it was used as a justification for the Holocaust.
Right.
Do you think it is dangerous to define Jews as an ethnicity?
I don't think that Judaism is an ethnicity in a way that matters to me, meaning that there is such a thing as Jewish ethnicity, but I don't really care about it. Right? As an Orthodox Jew, I define Judaism as a philosophy, a culture, a religion. I don't care if your mom was Jewish. Right? Religiously speaking, I do, because it's a prereq. Like, you're born into Judaism, you are now religiously, it is incumbent upon you.
Question is how many Groypers are going to be in the Q&A line. TPUSA did them the favor of putting them in front, but who knows what's going to happen here.
Are absolutely awful and actually anti-Semitic and are terrible people who are ethnically Jewish. The name Noam Chomsky comes to mind. Right? Like, there are plenty of Jews who I just think are ethnic Jews who I think are terrible people. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, the conflation of the term is odd to me. That's why, you know, I've said before that I think there's
I presume there are Orthodox Jews who he thinks are terrible people as well.
say bad Jews. What I mean by bad Jews is the same thing that a Christian would mean if you said somebody's a bad Christian, meaning that there's a set of values that being Jewish means, and if you violate those values, you could be bad at being Jewish, right? I mean, you could be bad at being Christian. So if you are a Jew, and for example, you believe that the state of Israel should be abolished, you believe that Judaism is a cult, you believe that Zionism is racism, you side with people who say all of these things, I think you are being a bad Jew, because I think that you are fundamentally betraying the philosophy and religion that Judaism represents. I don't think you're betraying your ethnicity. I don't care about your ethnicity. I think it's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, that's another inconsistency on Shapiro's part there. It's like, well, you've already admitted that the ethnicity
My question
ties
is
into
about
the religion in a
assimilation,
fundamental way.
intermarriage, and the American melting pot. A common critique of immigrants to the U.S. is that they don't want to assimilate, but rather preserve their status as a separate ethnicity, culture, religion, or nationality within the U.S. Some parents may teach their kids to only marry within their identity subgroup. To me, that's not consistent with judging people on the content of their character, which I stipulate is a fundamental American value. I acknowledge that shared values are important for a successful marriage, and people have the right to marry whoever they want. Nevertheless, I think teaching one's children
Super
to
chat saying bad
self-segregate
Jew and USS
in
Liberty.
marriage, there's something un-American about that. What do you think?
So I disagree in the sense that I agree with the one statement you made, which is that shared values are key to a
The
solid
Groypers
marriage.
are the
and
cowards,
shared religious
Alex.
values are very key to a solid marriage. How are you going to bring up your kids? Are you going to?
They're the ones who
religious
dodged
conflict,
substantive
for example?
debate.
I think that the question you're really asking is about the Jewish law that suggests that you're not supposed to marry people who are not Jewish. I don't have a problem with that. Not only do I not have a problem with that, I don't have a problem with Christians saying they want to marry other Christians or Muslims saying they want to marry other Muslims. I think that there are certain overarching values in the United States that we all have to believe in, regardless of our religious values. But I think that what you agree on inside a marriage actually has to be broader and deeper than what you have to agree on to remain in the same country. There are a lot of people in this room. We all live in the same country, and I hope that we all believe in the values of the Constitution of the United States. When I married my wife, my first question was not, do you believe in the values of the Constitution of the United States? It was, what are the values that you and I want to raise our children with? What religion do we want to raise our children
Right,
with?
Chris. Ben Shapiro largely is using religion to carry the water that other people would carry with race. And that's a valid criticism.
I am fine with religious diversity in America so long as we agree on the key principles of the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence. America's a creedal country, right? That's the good stuff. But I'm not going to mandate that anybody has to marry anybody else in order to demonstrate how broad-minded they are, because even if they disagree on religion, even if they disagree, like, I don't think those are the only values. They are the baseline values for us to share a country. Baseline values to share a country are not the same as baseline values to share a marriage or a bed.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Hi. So I studied math. I love idealized systems, and so it seems to me like if you could build a nation from scratch apart from the messiness of the real world, the idea of limited government where everyone kind of pulls themselves up by their own bootstraps is a great system. But given that for the majority of the existence of America, the government has had laws in place that selectively advantage certain parts of society. We don't live in that idealized world. To what extent do you support the government using resources to bring up people that have been disadvantaged in society, mainly the poor, so that we can get to a point where there is some sort of level starting line?
Well, I mean, I think that first
Ain't
of all,
gonna
you have
happen,
to distinguish between
is the
members
answer.
of the poor. I mean, treating the poor as like a universal class that doesn't have any sort of income malleability or movement is a category.
There's always going to be inequality, and if you try to get rid of it entirely, you'll find way more.
In our society. And I remember a time when I was earning a fraction of what I make now. Thank God. I'm sure there will be a point in the future when I'm canceled where I'll make a fraction of what I'm making now. Right? People move up and down on the income scale, and I think that's fine. If the question is, do I think that the government has a role in bettering the lives of people who have suffered, I think that the government is the organ of last resort, meaning that the government signing checks typically has not truly done a great job in raising people from poverty. In fact, it has tended to create a sort of perpetual poverty if it creates dependence. And creating the proper incentive structure from an economic...
By the way, I don't believe this. Like, I think that this puts it too strongly. It doesn't create poverty. They would still be poor. It does create dysfunction, though, especially in terms of marriage and family formation. But does it make them all poor? Nah. Sorry, bro.
is that if you are experiencing financial difficulty, this is why I rely so heavily on social fabric, right? I've talked a lot about family. I've talked a lot about community and religious community. First you go to family, then you go to religious community.
Family first.
You're a part of. Then
That's right.
you go to local government, then you go to state government, then you go to the feds, right? Meaning that there should be this sort of movement all the way along the line. I think that unfortunately in the United States we've reversed that, and we've said, okay, the option of first resort is to go to the federal government, and the option of second resort is to go to the state government.
I haven't seen
And at no
Dershowitz in a
point
back
do you
and forth,
tier
Mike. I've
yourself or
seen
tier neighbors. And we've
I've seen him make some cogent arguments, but not like in that kind of frenetic debate style.
Anybody is entitled to anything. And I don't think you're entitled to that stuff simply by virtue of living in America. I think that you should feel a feeling of debt for whatever you happen to receive in the mail from other taxpayers who are footing the bill for that, or future generations who are. So the role of government, in circumstances where the government does have to step
Ben says, you should feel some sort of debt for the benefits you receive. I disagree. You pay the opportunity cost. Better pick it up when you get the chance. It's not for you to be nice. This is not a system based on being nice.
legitimately can't take care of themselves. I'm talking about the severely mentally ill. I'm talking people who are severely disabled.
The society is often cruel. Take advantage of its kindness where you can.
Benefit check to those because everything else has fallen through without creating an incentive structure such that the community is not incentive.
Josh says, meditates deeply, channels inner Jew, does Scrooge McDuck backstroke through shekels.
So if
Hashtag life goals.
are we moving toward a smaller government or moving toward a bigger government? Is the problem not enough government benefits, or is the problem that government has stepped in and quashed the ability of private people to take care of each other in order to make society better, specifically for individual people, right? When somebody in my community is suffering, they go to my shul and they ask the rabbi for money, and then we all chip in. I mean, I'm a big believer in charity. I'm a big believer in people helping each other out. I think it's better for them. I think it's better for society than the government sucking enormous quantities of cash out of the system and then injecting it randomly as though they're putting filler in somebody's butt.
But yeah, that's a debate worth having. Should you forego or feel bad about taking advantage of welfare and other government programs? I think no. You pay the opportunity cost, and you pay in terms of society's lack of regard for your welfare in many other ways. It's not for you to turn down what padding is offered,
Telling people what they should.
or to feel bad about it particularly.
I just wanted to ask, what's the harm, if somebody's going to be a happier person because they say that they're a man or a woman, like what's the harm in just letting them do it?
I'm not in favor of government banning people who are adults. Children I'm in favor of banning because now you're talking about somebody who's not capable of consent. Right? All of our laws are based on the ability of people to consent. If you're a child, you can't consent. So I'm very much in favor of banning gender transition for kids. I think that it's frankly evil. I think you're making decisions for children who are not capable of making decisions for themselves that are permanent and have long-lasting, significant, and severe impact. As far as adults, if you're 25 and you want to get a sex change surgery and you feel like it's going to make you feel better, you have the right to do it. You do. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I mean, the research on this stuff tends to be somewhat conflicting, but if it works for you, it works, right? It's a free country. Now, that's really not the question that's being asked in our society today, because I don't think there are that many people who are like, we want to ban gender surgery for a 30-year-old. I'm not seeing the campaign for that. What I am seeing is a campaign on the left that says that my child is going to be removed from my home 10 years from now if I don't agree with the left's view of how I should treat my child's gender confusion at age 4.
Here's Ben Shapiro calling out the nonsense straight up, taking the cultural right-wing position. about as strongly as you can.
Or the left is going to suggest that it has no impact on my business if I employ a woman at Hooters and she shows up the next day as a man, right? Like that does have an impact on my business, right? But the left would suggest, well, you should sort of deal with it. Well, it turns out that gender does mean something, and it does have an actual meaning to people outside of you. I'm not going to go along with the general societal willingness to rewrite basic facets of human nature and human biology, and frankly, mammalian biology, in order to suggest that a delusion is true. Now, if the best thing for the person is for the person they can't change what they're thinking, there's no way for them to get out of it, they want to change their body so that they feel that it is more in line with what they're thinking, more power to them, that's their problem. And as I've said before, by the way, I've said this 1,000 times and everybody on the left automatically ignores it, of course. I've said that if I were in a room with a transgender person having dinner with that person, I wouldn't go out of my way to call them by their biological sex. Because it's rude, right? I wouldn't do that if I were sitting right across from them. But if you're asking me in a public forum whether a man is a man and a woman is a woman, or asking me to call a man a woman in a public forum, the answer is no.
Again, taking about as strong a stance as you can on these cultural issues of left versus right. That's the question, Alex. Will any Fuentes factioneers reach the mic at all?
I've noticed on the Daily Wire website, there is no readily accessible public editorialized policy. My question is for you is, on what do you base your journalistic ethical standards for your publication?
I mean, it's sort of a vague...
All the questioners so far, I think, seem like not only are they lefty, but they'd be typed as lefty from the outside.
An opinion conservative side.
There's been no alt-right looking questioners so far.
We try to cover the truth. We sometimes make mistakes. If we do make mistakes, we retract it. And what exactly is it that you're asking?
Right. So my question is, like, for example, for every other mainstream media news outlet,
Yeah, Alex.
there are ethical
Screening is plausible. I don't know. I'm sure they were trying very hard to get to the front of the line.
Reuters, which define how you should cover certain things, how you should retract certain articles, and I couldn't even find on your website like a specific link to previous news articles that you had retracted in the past.
I mean, in terms of what we've like full-on retractions in the past, that'd probably only be a couple of articles that have turned out not to be true, and so we've run retractions. You could probably search in the bar. Honestly, I don't know. We've run...
Very kind of marginal question, but a valid one. I think that you should have all your retractions in an easy-to-find page.
Corrections. We issue corrections all the time, just like every other news outlet. I've never felt the need to issue a giant editorial policy, also because I don't think journalistic institutions actually keep up with their own journalistic policies half the time. So, but the bottom line is, here's the bottom line. Regardless of what the policy is, the proof is in the pudding. Either you like the site or you don't. Either you believe the site or you don't. Either you think we're lying or you don't. I don't think that articulating a policy, a 5-page policy that you're, first of all, I'm glad that you're the person who reads the policies. Because really, like, they write these policies and lawyers spend lots of time figuring them out and no one has ever read them. So congratulations to you. You are the person who read the policies and really, like, good for you. But I think that in the end, people believe news outlets based on what they find to be credible and not based on the articulated policy of the news organization. I find the New York Times to be credible sometimes and not credible sometimes, and their editorial policy has nothing to do with it, really. Yeah, it's fine, but one more, yeah.
So do you have any objective ethical standard, or is it purely based off of your subjective reasoning and opinion?
Well, I think that whenever it comes to interpretation of news, there's a certain subjectivity level. I reject outright the idea that news outlets are purely objective. I don't think the New York Times is objective. I don't think we're objective. I don't think CNN is objective. I
wonder if he has some secret signal to move things along or not, because she's getting to ask rebuttal questions or more extended questions, and I'm not sure that the more hostile questioners are going to be able to. You heard in the beginning only one question per customer.
Hi Ben, I'm Neil. I study CS at Stanford. I am a huge fan of yours. I watch you on YouTube all the time.
Again, wouldn't take him to be a Groyper from the outside.
I do lean left, however, so I disagree with you on some issues.
Yep.
Well, first of all, okay, quick, can we have a show of hands? People who are liberal to left in the audience, people who disagree with what I say, can you raise your hands, please? Thank you for coming.
A lot of lefties. A lot of lefties in that audience.
Like, really, it makes the country better that you come to this, and we should go to your lectures, too. It's good. I mean, we do. They're called the professors.
So my question is about abortion. That's the issue that I disagree on. You make a very good argument, and I'm going to run with this notion that life starts at conception.
Okay.
In Freakonomics, Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner, they talk about how...
Fletcher says, my sense is that Shapiro's core audience is disaffected liberals. I think that's somewhat true, and like, kind of,
don't have...
you know, closeted conservatives in liberal areas, like make up, I think, a significant portion of his audience.
Of the unborn
But
fetus
I'm not
over
sure about the proportions.
individuals.
Okay, so a couple of answers on this. First, I think there are serious challenges to the Levitt thesis that the crime rate, so the basic thesis of Stephen Levitt in Freakonomics is that the crime rate drop is associated with the advent of Roe versus Wade. That Roe versus Wade happened, millions of babies got aborted, and then those babies that were aborted couldn't commit crimes, and so the crime rate dropped. The problem is the timeline doesn't actually match up. The crime rates didn't begin to drop until 1994. Roe versus Wade happens in 1973. The vast majority of violent crime, or at least a huge plurality of violent crime, is happening for kids who are actually born, but who are actually between the ages of 15.
Chris Alton says his viewers are libertarians, not right-wingers. I'm afraid you'll find that they're considerably to the right of the American political spectrum, Chris.
Additional resources provided by the federal government and the states to policing. So putting aside the statistical argument, now to the moral argument. So the moral argument is that is being made by you, and I don't want to mischaracterize it, is that the probability that, or possibility that somebody's going to grow up to be a killer means that they are putting some quotient of life at risk. The problem is that you cannot kill somebody based on a probability. You wouldn't do this in any form of life, right? We can't have a Tom Cruise Minority Report approach to children or to criminals in real life, right? There's a big room. I'm sure somebody at this point...
I'm Minority Report pilled myself.
Serious. That doesn't mean that if I just killed everyone in the room, I've now prohibited the crime. Or if I killed the one person in the room...
Yeah, Ultra, they're easy to exclude, but he made it sound like he was going to, face their questions.
Because again, I'm making a judgment.
And I don't blame him if he just excludes them, but then the Q&A won't be exactly what was expected.
That a lot of people who have abortions may not have great resources to raise the child. The solution to that is not to kill the child in order to prevent possible future crime. The solution is that people should be having babies more responsibly, and that local communities, particularly religious communities, should step in and help out when single moms need help. And by the way, that does happen a lot, right? And that's something...
Ultra says, I would just exclude them. Respectable take to just exclude them, given their stance on excluding people they don't like.
Yeah.
Hi, Ben. I'd like to ask a question about identity politics. Sure.
Ooh.
So, to establish credibility, I guess, I'm a little brown, first-generation American, immigrant and LGBT activist. I'm also conservative.
Probably not a Groyper.
Sorry to the person who gave the shout-out before, that there's more to the description, it turns out.
I believe we can be friends with people we disagree with. But as a result of this combination of identities, I've been called a bigot, a race traitor, I've been mocked, and all this kind of stuff, which kind of led me to become a closet conservative. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, what advice do you have for closet conservatives to survive in a climate or an environment like a college campus like this, so that I can get A's in my classes, but also voice my opinion on essays?
Okay, so I have a thriving... So first of all, as you can see from the people in the crowd, thank you for being somebody who doesn't identify by your identity groups, but more identifies by the things that you believe. I think that that's very important. Beyond that, the best way to get by, so I have a thriving debate with my friend Dennis Prager on this. So Dennis, who hasn't been in college in a while, he thinks that you should just say whatever you want. You should say it clearly and publicly in front of professors, and if you get the C, you've stood up for principle. And I think this is silly. So what I have always suggested is that the means must be tailored to meet the ends. In class, you're not there to mouth off. You're there to get the A and move on to whatever grad school you want to go to. Right? I mean, that's what you're there for. And if you're writing in blue books, anonymity provides you with a certain amount of protection. And what that means really is that you can speak out as much as you want in many cases in the class, and then if you write in the blue book, you can write what the teacher wants to hear and get the A. That was my plan at UCLA. So in class, I was Frederick Hayek, I was Milton Friedman, I was Thomas Sowell, and then in my blue books, I was Bernie Sanders. And it worked out great, right? I mean, like, and it's not immoral, because the truth is that the professors are not testing you on your actual thoughts, right? The professors very often are testing you on how well you parrot back to them their thoughts.
Well, I'd object to this a little bit. You know, if conservatives play that game and liberals don't, then it's going to change the face of this country pretty radically, if that's the entire tone of undergrad education.
Out when you can. The question is, when can you?
Those who risk nothing gain nothing. In this respect, KMG would call me a bootlicker, but I'd be considerably less cautious than Ben advises.
Huge fan. I used to be those guys outside in the signs, and I used to be huddled in my room in Oakland watching you on YouTube. So watching these guys get destroyed. So one of my questions
is a possible Groyper?
Have you been keeping up with what's going on with Roger Stone, and what your thoughts on maybe some of the jurors or the judge?
Not a Groyper question, more of a softball question.
Honest, I haven't followed.
Also, Epstein didn't kill himself.
That's a teensy bit of maybe Groyper energy, but definitely not Groyper questions.
Okay, I'll admit that's.
But if they're just screening,
funny.
if they're not screening based on looks, or if they are just screening based on looks,
unfortunately,
then
I don't have a good answer on this. I haven't
he'd
been
be
watching
in the
Stone stuff
Groyper
too
pile.
closely because, honestly, my focus on
Alex, this is totally what
all
Groypers
that
look
kind of
like.
stuff.
They got the
So
MAGA
I've
cap
been
and
really
everything.
watching that pretty closely.
I know
I wish I had a better
he
answer.
is
So
what
if
you'd
you have another
classify as a
question you wanna ask
MAGA,
it, go for it, 'cause
as a MAGA-tard, but he looks like a Groyper.
Yeah, there was a guy outside, Felix, he's a really nice guy, talking about healthcare is a right for everyone. And he brought up some stuff I'd never even heard of, like France, Japan, and Singapore have a two-tier system for healthcare.
Yes.
He believes healthcare is a right, for,
Yeah.
a human right for everyone.
Ultra and I are
he
right.
brought up
This
that,
is what the
if you
Groyper
had enough
stereotype
money,
would
you
look
could
like.
pay for it, or there's a government one. And these are just ideas that I never heard before, and
Yeah.
maybe what are your thoughts, how you would refute that?
So there are a couple of basic questions. The framework I like to use when I'm talking about healthcare and thinking about healthcare is that healthcare, you can have three attributes of healthcare: affordability, quality, universality. Right? It can be cheap, it can be good, and it can be for everyone. But you can only have two of those things. You can't have all three. There is no program that is cheap and good and for everyone. It just does not work that way. Right? If it's cheap and it's universal, then you're going to end up with rationing, which is sort of what you have in Canada and the UK. If you have universal and good, it ends up being pretty expensive. And that's kind of what you have in the United States, sort of, because the truth is that there is basically universal health care in the sense that if you go to the hospital, they can't turn you away, but it's very expensive in the United States. Now, it's also on demand. You can get, like, we are the truth is the world has a two-tier healthcare system. It goes like this. You live in a socialized country, and then if you have money, you come here for your surgeries. Right? But the question is what kind of health system you would like to create. The health system that I would prefer is one that is cheap and good, but not completely universal. And then the gaps are filled by charity hospitals, the gaps are filled by local government. The reason for that is because the vast majority of medical innovation happens in the United States. It's very easy for everybody to live off the legacy of the fact that
Yeah, this is a good point by Shapiro here. You know, the U.S. is basically powering medical innovation, and so you know, you're paying the cost for that. But it's not like someone else would pick up the slack if the U.S. were to stop.
the best drugs are created here, all the best surgeries are invented here, that all of the stuff that the rest of, I mean, it's basically like the American economy, right? The American economy goes south, everybody is toast.
This is the downside to
well,
pausing.
the American medical innovation
Got to
system
motor
goes
mouth
south,
them even
everybody
more.
is toast. There are no new medicines that are being created. So a free market system incentivizes the creation of new, better surgeries. It incentivizes more doctors. There are doctor shortages in a lot of these places. Singapore is I mean, we can get into the vagaries of all of these systems. They're all very, very different. But what I would suggest is that America needs to move in more free market direction because more free market means lower prices generally and more innovation. It doesn't achieve universality for people, for example, who have pre-existing conditions on insurance. That's where you need charity to come in. And again, as a last resort, maybe local government.
This will be the last question.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk and for speaking to us today. My question is about
Oh,
how
the last
often
question.
in your videos and articles you talk about America being the best country in the world, and I'm wondering whether that contradicts your belief in both economic freedom and the right to life for the unborn, because based on indices I've seen for economic freedom, for example, America is, I think, 17th on Cato Institute's Index of Freedom, 12th for Heritage Foundation's Economic Freedom Index, And for right to life for the unborn, it's, I think, one of only 7 countries that permits third trimester abortions. So how would you give like a factual defense for America being not just one of the best, but the best country in the world?
Sure. Okay. So here's how I would put it. The best baseball team in baseball is the Washington Nationals. They won the World Series. Okay? That does not mean that every player on their team is the best at his position. Right? The United States is the best overall. If you could choose anywhere in the world to grow up, to have a chance at success, the United States would be the place. We have the most robust economy.
Yeah.
We have freedoms that you don't have in other places in the world.
Preach
Freedom of
it,
speech,
brother.
freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. We have constitutional freedoms guaranteed. Right? All these things are wondrous things that not only
Christopher, there weren't really
unique,
any
but also
great like
undergird the rest of Western civilization
adversarial
that, as the United
questions.
States
No
fosters
chance for
everybody
back
else.
and forth.
That does not mean that I think that our generalized abortion policy is the best on
Except
earth.
the
Nor does it
lefty
mean that
girl.
Our generalized tax policy is the best on earth. Now, it is also true that the economic freedom index, very often, like that particular study, tends to deal with regulatory climate. The United
His
States'
speech was
regulatory
crushing
climate, particularly
to the
with regard
Groyper
foreign
faction.
investment, for example, is weak.
In my
needs to be
opinion.
strengthened. That's why we all are looking to make it better.
So it's not all a loss.
America can get better in a variety of ways. But what I mean by that is America is the least racist country on earth. It is the place with the most opportunity on earth. It has done the most good for the most people in America and around the globe. America is the most rights-based country on earth. It has the best creed that has ever been created by man in history.
I wish he'd just go for
Seems
like
a pretty good
way more
start.
questions, but
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
guess he's got
Thanks for
stuff to
coming
do.
out.
Yeah, Fletcher, the Groyps were diluted by the lefties. Lefties got the front of the line. It's not like Ben hid from adversarial questions, but there just wasn't room for a lot of Groyps, I guess. And the question is whether that one Groyper-looking dude was vetted beforehand. But yeah, not very many questions. It's a lot easier to get smaller events than big events, right? So, oh, by the way, guys, my Discord server is about to have a posted link, and y'all can discuss this Q&A. Did Ben Shapiro BTFO the Groyps? Did the Groyps BTFO Shapiro? Has Shapiro dodged? And you can come on and discuss that if you feel like it. So there's my Discord link right there. Yeah, I think that the Groypers... Right, the Groypers couldn't get to the front right there, right? And you saw the problem with, like, in the TPUSA case and in some other cases, like, either it was a really small event, which meant that, like, there weren't that many questioners, and so they could always get in, or TPUSA put them in the front of the line. With this, it's a huge event, probably tons of people looking to ask a question, and not a lot of time for question and answer. I think that Shapiro's broadside against the alt-right and against Fuentes was extremely effective and punishing. But, you know, there wasn't a chance for back and forth, really, except with that lefty girl. Elizer says he planted all those questions. I very much doubt that he planted all those questions. It didn't sound like he was prepared for that lefty girl's question way back when. But, you know, it doesn't seem like the Groypers were let through. Ultra Testosterone says, Kyle, I think they got there early for Kirk and got him by surprise. Yeah, that's true. I think that at first it was a surprise, you know, this whole Groyper dynamic. Now it's not a surprise, and you'll see people handling it in a variety of ways. Shapiro was one of the best set to handle it just because of the size of his audience. Alex says he made Nick the theme, gave Nick more attention. This is a win for Nick. I disagree. I think that Nick was already getting plenty of attention. I don't think that there's a way to just ignore someone who has like 7K viewers. That's a big boy right there. 7K viewers is a lot of viewers. And then also, you know, getting involved with Matt Walsh, with Charlie Kirk, you know, he's mixing it up. And when you're mixing it up, you know, you can't really just ignore that. Mike says, if you give someone attention, I think you play into their hands. That's how Trump became president. I don't think that's exactly how Trump became president. And it was mostly like, if you look at the news coverage, a lot of it involved giving Trump the mic, whereas Ben Shapiro is never giving Fuentes the mic, and that's a big difference there. I kind of want to see, I really do want to see a debate between Fuentes and Shapiro. I think it would be epic, but I doubt it's ever going to happen. I don't think that Shapiro is ever going to give Fuentes the mic, and he's probably going to try to lobby for everyone else to avoid giving Fuentes the mic. And really, if Trump doesn't get the mic, Trump doesn't win. Pineapple Platypotamus says, Shapiro calling Fuentes a Nazi is exactly like calling a leftist a plant. Just being wrong, not necessarily malicious. Yeah, he has a definition of Nazi which probably includes anyone who's going to stridently defend Germany's record in the Second World War in modern America. MND says the debate would never happen under no circumstances. I think it could happen if things had been played a little bit differently by Fuentes. If he had hit his power level a bit more, maybe he could have gotten in. But I think at some point he was working for Ben Shapiro. But yeah, Mike says Fuentes will have to settle for Halsey then, I guess. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. He fears the consequences of what could be heard. Well, he understands the dynamic here at play, which is that if you give someone the mic, you grow their following. That being said, I think that it's important to do as he did and address directly the points that are being raised. If you try to dodge the points, you just look weak. Let's see. Really, no one wants to join? No one wants to join the Discord? That's okay. If no one wants to join the Discord, I'm going to shift over to discussing some more of Innuendo Studios. So check that shit out. Because Innuendo Studios, if I'm not mistaken, has far more to say. Let's see. And let's delete this. The second thing I had here. I had a window capture for the chat. Deleted. Innuendo Studios. Here we go. Yeah. I think. Yeah, this guy is like a far lefty. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's communist. But he analyzes the alt-right in a way that's sometimes useful. And Fletcher, if you got anything else, anything better to watch, then just link it in the chat, and we'll go ahead and give it a gander.
Say, for the sake of argument, you run a modestly successful YouTube channel, and given the current political reality, you're thinking of doing some videos on the alt-right. Let's say you've been trying to understand the alt-right for some time, and would like to do a series that tackles the big questions. What are the rhetorical strategies the alt-right uses to legitimize itself and gain power? How do these strategies work? Why do they work? How do we keep from falling for them? And, importantly, how do we catch ourselves when we start using them too? You're thinking of calling this series the Alt-Right Playbook. Setting aside that any lefty who makes a YouTube series with alt-right in the title will see their life go to hell, there are 3 things you'd have to clarify from the get-go. First, what is the alt-right? For clarity's sake, you'd have to tell people that the alt-right is a pack of loosely aligned groups and individuals that have existed for quite a while at the peripheries of American conservatism, but have recently gained...
Okay, this is going to be interesting. So, Pineapple Platypotamus... What a name. I've never heard Fuentes say anything Nazi. So, let's see if we can find the Fuentes cookie video. Yeah, here we go.
Max says, if I take 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies and Cookie Monster has 15 ovens...
Okay, so Pineapple Platypotamus says, Holocaust jokes don't make you a Nazi. Okay, let's look at Fuentes on Hitler. Because he has some interesting things to say on Hitler.
Said, quote, I think that the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Globalism is what I don't want. Okay, so far so good. She goes on to say, whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. You know, he was a National Socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. Based? Yo, based on God? She goes on to say, the problem, what Hitler...
So will you see Fuentes say things like this about people he disagrees with? Will he be like based? Will he be kind of, low-key praising them?
Did wrong, however, is that he had dreams outside of Germany.
Pineapple Platypotamus says, yeah, Hitler has been lied about, so he says. So Pineapple Platypotamus, how do you think he's been lied about? right? Because that's the germane question here. And I invite you, as anyone else can, to join my Discord. I'm gonna plug this goddamn Discord all fucking night until someone comes on in voice chat. I invite you to come on in Discord, or just keep on chatting in the chat. What do you think Hitler was? How do you think Hitler was misrepresented by history? Older Testosterone says, yeah, Holocaust jokes and supporting Hitler isn't Nazi. Makes sense, bro. Yeah, I mean, it might not be Nazi if you're like, your whole thing is to be a comedian, right? If your whole thing is to be shocking. But you'll find that people in the Fuentes faction, people in the alt-right, they don't joke about things they care about that way, right? They don't they don't joke and low-key support things that they feel are sacred. Pineapple Platypotamus says, dude, I've made Holocaust jokes. Everyone's made Holocaust jokes who's even mildly edgy in internet chat rooms, my dude. That's not the issue. The issue is that this joke is an indication that you don't believe the Holocaust happened, first of all. And second of all, it's alongside a bunch of other stuff that's anti-Jewish. At which point it seems like maybe you genuinely don't believe that the Holocaust happened. And it's alongside it as well, being in a community of people who are extremely skeptical and how would you put it, paranoid about being lied to by the government.
Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way.
Anyway, so Pineapple Platypotamus says he said it didn't happen, but not 6 million. He said I think it was 200,000, which is denying the vast majority of the deaths in the Holocaust, right? And it doesn't even make the slightest amount of sense, because it was the extirpation of these Jewish communities in Europe, right? First there were these Jewish communities, then there weren't. And you're going to say that, you're going to deny that those Jewish communities were extirpated by Hitler? Why? Tidem123 says, Stalin was worse. Stalin was a very different case than Hitler, because Stalin wasn't going out and genociding people outside his borders, for one thing, and because Stalin's deaths, the way Stalin gets to millions killed is that you look at the famines, right? The famines which stretched across Russia and hit Ukraine particularly hard. So by doing that, by taking a demographic analysis of where you think the population should be versus where it was, based on trend lines, then you get a difference of millions. And that's how you get to millions killed by Stalin. If you just count people in the gulags, then he has a hard time scratching 1 million. Right? That's the comparison there, is the people who Stalin sent into camps to die, the way Hitler sent people into camps to die, that doesn't, that has trouble reaching 1 million. So yeah, like profoundly disanalogous situations, in my view. But nobody who's who prioritizes American interests, or who has like a in my opinion like a sane view of history, would say that Stalin was anything but a vicious killer. Yeah, compared to Hitler, Stalin was quite benign, but he will still remain one of history's greatest monsters. Let's see.
Footholds in the Republican Party proper. The term alt-right implies more or less what you think it would, positioning themselves as the young, edgy nirvana to the antiquated motley crew of 70s and 80s conservatism. They seek to replace and critique the likes of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan for being, let's not mince words here, not reactionary enough. The alt-right, the people who adopt the label and those who just parrot their talking points.
Spiritual Mamzer says, sophisticated Holocaust deniers never give a number lower than 3 million. I think once you're in like that territory, at that point you're not a Holocaust denier. Once you've said millions were killed, in my opinion, that puts you outside of Holocaust denial territory pretty solidly. The historical estimates range basically from like 5 million to 6 million. But if you're going to go a little bit lower than that, it may not be supported, but it's not Holocaust denial, right? If you're saying 3 million, that's like weird. If you're saying 4 million, it's like, well, you have a heterodox view. But if you're saying it's like hundreds of thousands, you're denying the vast majority of the deaths in a way that you can pretty easily see. Globalism lies about Stalin. I don't know about globalism lying about Stalin, Pineapple Platypotamus. What definitely happens is the left lies about Stalin. The left characterizes the Soviet Union as this amazing paradise, often, or at the very least as a justifiable response to the brutality of feudalism, when the brutality of the Soviets was far worse than the brutality of the Tsars across a whole range of axes. Ultra Testosterone says, Fuentes fans clearly think he's a Nazi, though. True! Look at the comment section. Right? And when you have a bunch of people deluded in that fashion, assuming that they are deluded, then you take pains to make that clear to them. Right? You don't just take that, right? If there were a bunch of 1488ers acting like I was their dude, I'd say get the hell out of here, man. I ain't your dude. Pineapple Platypotamus. Leftism is mixed with communism somehow. Yeah, well, communists are leftists. They don't like to play around with every topic, Pineapple Platypotamus. If someone is joking, like, from the left at them about how, like, something like, you know, oh, isn't it funny how there are going to be so many non-whites in the country that you're going to be replaced. If someone was making a joke along those lines, they'd be absolutely rabidly furious, and that is what you see. When they get challenged on their core values, then what you see is that they get super, super mad. They're not very happy to joke about things that matter to them, only about things that are going in a direction that corresponds with their political beliefs. And they're forced into that position, and they even say it. They're forced into that position by the regime, by the censorship regime that they're operating under. At which point they have to obfuscate their perspective with humor, and they explicitly say that they're doing that.
Has high overlap with white supremacist think tank the National Policy Institute, Stormfront, and the Ku Klux Klan, Breitbart News and various sections of 4chan, 8chan, and Reddit, sections of the asshole atheist community, anti-feminist YouTube.
Yeah, and you can see here, like, this is how the left tries to smear people who are often explicitly and vigorously opposed to the alt-right, like Sargon and American Atheist, or Amazing Atheist, rather. Both of those people are absolutely opposed to the alt-right, but he just throws them in there because, you know, fair game, they're right-wingers, and so they can get tossed in, mixed in with the rest.
Pickup artists and rape apologists, the not all men, all lives matter, and Gamergate crowds, and basically anyone who uses the terms social justice warrior or virtue signaling unironically. Not everyone in these groups is in the alt-right, but the alt-right traffics at the intersection between them. There's a wide range of differing and frankly incompatible ideas about government and the social order among these groups, but as it gains power, the alt-right is congealing into a somewhat cohesive ideology. And the reason they matter at this moment in history is that of all the people in the 2016 primaries, only one was the alt-right candidate. And while not everyone who voted for him is in the alt-right, they are his base, his most ardent supporters, and they carried him all the way to the White House.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that they carried him all the way to the White House. I think there were some rather more important constituencies in there, my dude.
Next, you'd want to clarify why they're called the alt-right. Alt-right is a term coined by National Policy Institute president, avowed white nationalist, and professional speedbag Richard Spencer. The term is meant...
Pineapple Platypotamus says, what are his Nazi beliefs? His Nazi beliefs are that Jews are a utterly foreign and hostile force in the West, which has to be extirpated, has to be named, has to be thrown out. Right. That's his Nazi beliefs, alongside the belief that the Germans were basically hard done by the poor Germans were the ones who got the hard end of the stick compared to the Jews. Right. That kind of thing is Nazi talk. Right. And you'll find Pineapple that whenever he gets the chance, he talks about the tribe, the merchants, the subversive globalist cadre, right? He's talking about Jews, like when he uses dog whistles like that. Like the notion that he doesn't have antipathy towards Jews is frankly just ignorance. EgyptoBot1 says, does Fuentes' rise scare you at all, or do you think his ilk will fizzle out? It scares me in a very profound way because I think it fundamentally reduces the viability of the right. It makes it so that the right is much more vulnerable to attacks by the left, and that's a very, very dangerous thing. In terms of them taking over power directly, quite impossible, right? They don't have the groundwork, they don't have the skill, don't have the determination, don't have the staying power to take power, right? That's completely out of the question, but what they can do is continue to dominate the conversation in the manner that they have. As people were saying before, Ben Shapiro, however well he may do, is forced to address this instead of address the left. It's a distraction if it was nothing else, but it is far more than that because it gives the left exactly what they want.
As a euphemism, a way of painting a happy face on racism. And that's not an opinion. One of the stated aims of Spencer's organization is the removal of non-whites from American society. And the purpose of rebranding white supremacy with a term like alt-right is so mainstream white people are not made to feel like racists when they vote for racist people with racist policies. So every time a journalist writes an article about the dapper fashions of the alt-right and doesn't title it Lipstick on a White Supremacist Pig, that journalist is being a coward and treating a hate group with kid gloves basically because the hate group asked them to. So, you might want to clarify why you put that euphemism in the title of your videos. And, well, you'd have to explain that while the alt-right is racist, they're not only racist. They're also misogynist, anti-feminist, Islamophobic, xenophobic, homophobic, transphobic.
Islamophobic is one of the funniest fucking words ever coined. One of the funniest terms ever coined, like Islamophobic. How could you be so Islamophobic? There's nothing to be scared of, my dude. There's nothing to be scared. How? How could anyone be Islamophobic? What could make them afraid? How could anyone, unless of course they've listened to Muslims speak about non-Muslims, how could anyone feel Islamophobic? Unless they've heard Muslims speak about non-Muslims, right? Unless they've heard, unless they listen to Muslim television stations talk about the kuffar, right? Yeah, but otherwise, like I don't know. I think it's just absolute bigotry. I don't understand it.
Classist, ableist, authoritarian, and
ableist. I take it back. Ableist. You're ableist, bro. You think that health is better than disease? How could you be so ableist? Goddamn ableists. Smartists. People who can walk-ists.
Fiercely anti-intellectual. So if you just did a find and replace of each instance of alt-right with white supremacist, you'd actually be leaving a lot out. That's not much of a defense for the term alt-right, it just paints a happy face on a bunch of horrible stuff, but it is useful to have a term that refers to the whole cluster, and you don't have the kind of internet pull where if you coined your own term, anyone would know what you're talking about. So you'll just have to promise not to use alt-right as a euphemism. When the alt-right is racist, you will have to call them racist.
Pineapple Platypotamus says, we should be allowed to question everything. Well, Pineapple Platypotamus, I've spent a long time with people in this cluster of political perspectives, and what I find is that they're extremely hostile to any questions about their core beliefs. right? Extremely hostile, beyond belief. So the notion that, oh, we question everything, that's just nonsense. That's not the Groyper Battalion, my dude. You've been had if you believe that the Groyper Battalion is about we question everything. There are things they don't question, and if you talk to them for even a little bit of time, you'll find that out.
When the alt-right is homophobic, you'll have to call them homophobic. If you're stuck with their term, don't use it the way they want you to. Third, you'd have to cover how to engage with the alt-right, which is actually pretty straightforward. Don't. The reasoning there may not be
Of course, you're doing it here.
immediately obvious, especially if you, say, once devoted an entire video to the importance of talking to anti-feminist hate mobs. So you'll have to explain. You have since then learned how such debates with the far right often go, thanks to conversations with people who have more lived experience than you. If some guy on Twitter shoots his mouth off about how, for instance, only precious snowflakes would care about how many black women are getting roles in Hollywood, maybe you push back on that. Maybe the conversation gets heated. Maybe you debunk his arguments, make your points, and he walks away in a huff. For you,
But too often your own contradictions are pointed out, and that hurts.
Interaction is over. But for folks on the far right, it often isn't. The far right keeps mental lists of people who represent the things they're mad about. The symbol of the liberal media, the symbol of video game feminism, the symbol of trans activism. FYI, these are usually women and people of color. And these people aren't people to them. They're just icons for a thing. And the way they express anger about those things is to attack those people.
This, I think, was, what the fuck was it? Rob Smith at the TPUSA Q&A. That was a case in point of the alt-right doing exactly what this guy says they do. How they said, control your gay in that Q&A. I mean, and in other ways demeaning him. To them, Rob Smith was merely his identity, and happily excluded was the fact that he had fought and risked his life for the United States of America. That doesn't carry much weight with these people.
So while you leave the argument and have a lie down, eat a sandwich, feel better, he may be...
By the way, Spiritual Mamzer, what's your political compass score? Because I'm suspicious of you. Gotta name the Mamzer.
Vents his frustration by hacking the email.
Fletcher says, I used to think they were just kidding as well, didn't take them seriously. Yeah, I mean, that's how a lot of people get into this space. That's how I got into this space. Like, I didn't think that the hatred was genuine, right? I thought that it was an expression of antipathy towards a censorship regime, primarily. But I came to find that, yes, indeed, it is genuine. More genuine than any other part of the movement.
Of whomever represents black women in Hollywood this week. This doesn't happen every time, or even most times, but it happens reliably enough that anytime you try and debate with a reactionary, you are gambling with someone else's safety. The purpose of debating these people is not to change their minds.
Yeah, well, this is a bit of a weak argument when you're on Twitter and everyone's anonymous, or most are anonymous, or you're anonymous and your interlocutor is anonymous. I think that, the idea that debate is dangerous in that context is fairly weak. And if debate is dangerous, how dangerous is it to be in a country with them?
But to stem the flow of lies and bad rhetoric, the alt-right is always...
Hey, Church of Entropy, how's it going? She says, Spiritual Mamzer is a fascist anti-fascist. Yeah, that sounds like controlled opposition. Yeah. Pineapple Platypotamus says, Ultra Testosterone, I don't think a race dying off is funny. Well, yeah, like you have your things that you think are important and you don't joke about them. That's how most people are. If you're a comedian, then you joke about everything, or you could be regarded to be joking when you talk about anything. But, hey, most people aren't like that. And most people, you can tell what they value. You can tell what they think is important by what they don't joke about. And what does that tell you when what they joke about is killing all the Jews? Alex says, what the fuck is wrong with you? Right. This is not funny to you, is it, Alex? Right? And what does it show? That the other stuff is funny.
He's recruiting, always trying to expand its.
Don't underestimate Ultra. He's a scholar. He knows how to get to the bottom of things.
Audience. And there are ways to reach their intended audience without engaging them directly. It's not only safer, it's often more effective to cut out the middleman, speak past them, not to them. If your purpose is to actually change the mind of a reactionary, well, doing that right is tricky, and doing it wrong can have serious consequences. So until you know for sure how to change the mind of a reactionary without fucking somebody else's life up, do not engage. Once you've got those 3 bits cleared up, the rest of your announcement is...
I mean, not engaging also has the risk of fucking somebody's life up. Doesn't it? A lot of this can be reversed and just applied to engaging with communists. A lot of the analysis that he applies to the alt-right, spoiler warning, applies to communists very well as well. You know, some of the best, sharp prods that he gives to the alt-right can be very efficiently turned around. And that's part of why I think he's useful to watch. What's going on here? You guys don't know the media labels tons of people Nazis? Well, first of all, I'm not sure about that. Media labels tons of people Nazis? No, I don't think so. I think that the cultural left and left-wing, what would you say? Left-wing op-ed people label people Nazis all the time, all the freaking time. In terms of the media, I don't think that they label a ton of people Nazis, although they do label people Nazis unjustifiably. But yeah, the notion that like there's a huge amount of like just CNN boilerplate coverage, which calls people like random people Nazis at gatherings. I don't think that's accurate, you know?
Just housekeeping. Because there are a whole lot of topics to discuss, you'll want to keep the videos short and to the point, and you'll have to alternate them with videos in your more usual wheelhouse, or else after a few months of nothing but this, videos would just be 5-minute blocks of sustained screaming.
Is that all?
You'll try to release them in batches when the subjects...
Yeah, okay.
Say, for the sake of argument, there's this guy who's running for president. It's late in the campaign, and one of his chief liabilities as a candidate is that over a dozen women have reported that he sexually assaulted them, among them his ex-wife and a 13-year-old girl.
By the way, Church of Entropy, while you're here, what do you think of Sabine Hossenfelder? She's an interesting thinker in physics, in my opinion.
Candidacy depends on convincing enough of the voting public that these accusations are false. But then, shortly before the election, audio leaks of this guy backstage on TV and unaware his mic was on, not just...
In fact, maybe we'll go to that right now. Sabine Hossenfelder. Let's see if I can find... She had some interesting... Yeah, here.
I want to explain just what the problem is with making measurements according to quantum theory. Quantum mechanics tells us that matter is not made of particles. It is made of elementary constituents that are often called particles, but are really...
So I'm hoping that the COE has some thoughts on this, or... Oh, doesn't know who it is? Yeah, so here's a case of her...
described by wave functions. A wave function is a mathematical object which is neither a particle nor a wave, but it can have properties of both. The curious thing about the wave function is that it does not itself correspond to something which we can observe. Instead, it is only a tool by help of which we calculate what we do observe. To make such a calculation, quantum theory uses the following postulates. First, as long as you do not measure the wave function, it changes according to the Schrödinger equation. The Schrödinger equation is different for different particles, but its most important properties are independent of the particle. One of the important properties of the Schrödinger equation...
Oh, are we losing high testosterone? Gotta go to bed, says high testosterone. Quitter! And also, thanks for coming, bro. Good to see ya. Keep fighting that good fight, ultra testosterone. We in this. Although ultra testosterone, try to be nicer to COE. Let's try to create a comfy community with COE and her cadre, right? Let's try and keep it core. Keep it comfy.
equation is that it guarantees that the probabilities computed from the wave function will always add up to 1, as they should. Another important property is that the change in time, which one gets from the Schrödinger equation, is reversible. But for our purposes, the most important property of the Schrödinger equation is that it is linear. This means if you have two solutions to this equation, then any sum of the two solutions with arbitrary prefactors will also be a solution. The second postulate of quantum mechanics tells you how you calculate from the wave function what is the probability of getting a specific measurement outcome. This is called the Born rule, named after Max Born, who came up with it. The Born rule says that the probability of a measurement is the absolute square of that part of the wave function which describes a certain measurement outcome. To do this calculation, you also need to know how to describe what...
At Josh Randall's request, I'll show you guys some Nazi dueling scars. I believe that, this was a very common thing in Germany. The Germans had a habit of doing this sort of thing. So yeah, dueling was a big thing, and you'd intentionally cover your eyes but not your face so that you could get those scars. It made you a man. Dueling is bad optics, says COE. I'm inclined to agree. I wish that they were duels that were non-crippling, non-lethal and non-crippling. Might be nice to do something with like a paintball style thing, where maybe like people have to intermittently run to cover, and the people who get the most hits, like you shoot, he runs from cover to cover, then he shoots, you run from cover to cover, and whoever gets the most hits wins. That kind of thing that builds martial skill, but doesn't kill anybody. Church of Entropy says, if I had my way, I'd do an IRL battle royale with trank darts in the forest. Hell yeah! I was dreaming about that as a kid, COE. I was dreaming about that as a kid. Like, some sort of trank dart battle, war games in the forest. That'd be sick. But, yeah. Unfortunately, trank darts are a hard thing because, they have a chance of killing you. So, I was thinking like maybe some kind of like numbing agent, which just makes it so that you're less coordinated but doesn't knock you out, because the knockout thing seems to, if you get hit with like a bunch of trank darts, then it's good night forever. Josh Randall says, notice how adamant they were at sickening their youth. Yeah, there's a lot to respect in the Prussian culture, I have to say. A lot to respect in the Prussian culture. Let's see if what have I missed in the chat? Have you looked into the North Pole of Saturn? Oh, let's look into the North Pole of Saturn. Let's look into it, bros. Yeah, the hexagon. The hexagon. Probably aliens. I'm gonna bet aliens up there. Aliens. Certainly aliens. It is fucking cool, though. I gotta say. Those astronomy pictures, those are fucking cool. And I'll fight anyone who says otherwise. They're sick. Sick, bro.
Hey, Kyle, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, controlled opposition. I know that voice anywhere. Let's see if I can.
All right,
good to know.
Good to know. I want to be notorious.
What's going on here? I'm trying to pull you up. Oh, okay. And Mike is in the chat too, and I didn't even know that Mike was in the chat. My God, it's a veritable party up here. What's up, folks?
Well, hey,
what's going on? You got your chat. You got the vocal chat.
Hell yeah.
Hey, Mike, tell me more about the doxing of Josh Neal.
Oh, you didn't hear about that? Well, it was really on Twitter. How did I find out about this? I just saw it on my feed. Somebody put his contact info out there. I mean, he didn't hide himself really well.
Like that is very true. But what
his real name it was mostly his real name, right? His Josh Neal thing. He was a hypnotist, which was a fucked up thing. Apparently, a hypnotherapist, like an ersatz shrink, basically. And yeah, like that reminds me of a conversation I had with him where he was like, "It's really irresponsible how you call people mentally ill," and I thought, someone like that has been in contact with the field, the field of psychology and of therapy. People like that are very obsessed with ethics around that subject. For my part, I'm a lay person. I don't got no ethics in that regard because I'm just making my calls. There's no weight behind my calls. There's no professional weight behind my judgment that you're mentally ill. So I don't feel that I have some sort of amazing responsibility not to hurt your feelings by calling you mentally ill. But people who are in that field tend to have that opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. He was some kind of failed musician, right? And a man's right activist.
I don't know about failed. He was in MRA circles, and he was a hypnotist, and he was a musician. All those things.
All right. I find it surprising. OV is also a musician. I don't know. Maybe there's a.
He has that musician vibe. I gotta say, OV does have that musician vibe as well. I knew that Josh Neal was
tough to be a white.
Go ahead.
Tough to be a white nationalist in Brooklyn. But
yeah, people do that shit. People do that shit though. People do that shit. There's like people who are far right in the most lefty of spaces.
Well, we talked about it before. You said like proximity equals like more integration always, but I think in some cases, like with the case of Josh Neal or with the case of OV, for example, they live in highly concentrated. How would you say that they're very close to the object that they hate, which makes it quite interesting. So, I'm not seeing many people from the South in the alt-right. Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure that that's true, but I think that what's largely behind like it's queer. It's a queer movement in the language of Pill Eater. He made that point on Luke Ford stream. Yeah, and so it's people who are like who are outside the mainstream, and the way to be most outside the mainstream is to be super right in lefty circles. That's part of it, I believe. That's a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing that they had film technology like this back in the day. Like these special effects, they're amazing. I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding.
Apparently, Neil was doxxed by one of the hardcore siege nats who would have differences of opinion.
Do you know which,
Not a surprise
which group?
Yeah.
That part of the right eats itself constantly. Fratricidal.
They're constantly doxing each other. It's like ridiculous.
As cannibalism. It's always more pure than down. Then they go again, and another one bites the dust. It
right.
Never
So
stops.
Conops, like back to our old conversation where I was saying that diversity makes it harder. It's not that it makes it so that there's not going to be bad feeling, but what it does do is make people who express that feeling be kind of marginalized loser types because you're sacrificing so much, risking so much to lay out those feelings. And also it makes people who express those feelings less pragmatic because you're losing so much business opportunity. You're losing so much networking opportunity by doing that, by taking on that position. And so, like it doesn't make that so that the feeling doesn't exist. In fact, I've noted that people who are married to Jews seem to be overrepresented in the anti-Semitic circles online. But nevertheless, it makes it so that the kind of person who expresses those sentiments is less practical, right?
Yeah, no, I can totally get that point. I just think that there are moments that assimilation, as it were, breaks down. If you understand what I mean.
Well, kind of not.
Where you see identity politics rising, people coming from the place being very aware of the place that they are in relationship to other communities, and then there might be a movement for agitating towards that and trying to find your identity.
You mean separatism, right?
Yeah, basically.
I'm not sure. Like I think that the separatism kind of depends on having bright lines to draw, like geographically, culturally, and when you have an amalgam, it becomes a lot harder to be separatist. Even though that doesn't mean that people get along necessarily. Like obviously, it's true that the places that are by far the most pro-diversity are the places that don't experience diversity at all. That's absolutely true. It's also true that this amalgamation makes separatism less practical. Those are both true
Yeah,
at the same
what
time.
would you say about the German case, for example? So, if it wasn't for the Nazis, for example, or the extreme anti-Semitism that was going on, Jews would basically have been like disappearing in Germany,
They would have
right? So, in
amalgamated, yeah,
terms,
and they felt
yeah,
like they were integrating, but there was that huge like siege fortification laid around their position in the sense that, like, if you look at how people talked about Jews and talked about marrying Jews, it was like, oh, you're going to marry a Jew. How catastrophic. That was what it was like in high society. Not just among like low society people, but among high society, how they would openly speak. It would be weird if you didn't speak like that. It's kind of like how in America the Church of Scientology is regarded, only way worse, right? And so, yeah,
I'm not so sure that, especially in the educated centers, if the anti-Semitism was that bad.
I think it
I think it
was
would.
like, and also another thing is to keep in mind is that the German hierarchy, the social hierarchy, was different. The army played a much bigger role. That was high culture there, like, and the army was very conservative. Had a lot of very anti-Semitic people, and that's a different world, a different social fabric. It changes the game.
Well, that's true, but a lot of life, of course, didn't play out in the military. Much of it was in society or in academia, and places like that, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's true. But what I would say is that, yeah, like a lot of this is analogous to siege warfare, and you have to like lay out networks, counter networks, ways of undermining and prying apart. And if it was the case that Germany was, if if the Nazis were trying to get not only the Jews but other large minorities that let's posit were just amalgamated in the German fabric, I don't think it would have worked. It had to be a turn on a relatively small and separated, culturally separated a group of people. Yeah.
well, I think it still helped that a lot of Jews weren't very integrated well, right? I mean, there were, of course, a lot of Jews that were integrating, but there were still a lot of people,
Yeah.
especially the
Again,
migrants
I think
who came
that
from Poland,
a modern
who
era
stayed
person
apart.
can think of it like being a member of the Church of Scientology, only like even more of a social burden. So yeah, a lot of them were yeah, religion was far more important. Is another sine qua non of the situation. Religion was super
But
super important.
don't you think so? Like, so I've been in these spheres for quite a long time now, a year, I would say, and there's something. Much of what they say, I think, is nonsense. But there's something that I think it has maybe some validity, and I think that's because the American elite in particular aren't behaving very well, and many people in the American elite are Jews, and I think because of their prominent position, it makes people keep an eye on. Even my brother said lately, "All right, Epstein. That reminds me of Weinstein. He doesn't have an anti-Semitic bone in his body."
Yeah.
So there's something going on.
Right. Yeah. But it's like completely embryonic compared to what was going on back then, and it's also like different in the other way, in the sense that you don't just like when you're trying to carve out the Jews, it becomes unclear what else you're trying to carve out, right? Like, and not because of Jewish obfuscation, but because the people who want to carve out the Jews have very different things that they want to carve out themselves, and they're very, 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 very vocal about that. But yeah, I mean, if anyone advances the concept that left-wing Jewish politicians or left-wing Jewish politically active people should really rethink their behavior, yeah, I would agree. Like, I think it's absolutely destructive, some of the things that are being done, being advocated, and just the unseemly things that you saw with Weinstein and Epstein, who were both associated with left-wing politics, like absolutely outrageous. Absolutely outrageous
Yeah,
behavior.
yeah, it makes me just how would you say? It makes me wonder why now in America the alt-right movement is so strong, and why is it so anti-Semitic as well? Like even the
I
European,
don't find that I don't find it weird,
well,
actually. Like,
Okay.
there
So will
was,
you elaborate why? Why is
well,
it so
a lot of
anti-Semitic
this
also?
is
And
very
why in
old.
Europe is it less so?
Are you familiar with William Luther Pierce? William Luther Pierce was an anti-Semitic author and was part of the American Nazi Party. He was a pal of Norman Rockwell, and there was a German-American Bund. There were neo-Nazis, or not neo-Nazis. There were Nazi sympathizers in America from the very beginning, since there were Nazis in Germany. Well, not since they were not since they were a twinkle in anyone's eye, but yeah, like once they became prominent there, they also became somewhat prominent here, although on a much smaller scale. And like since then, it's never been annihilated, and so that's always been there behind the scenes. And so it's finding new ways to propagandize. But if you look, like it was never gone. Like you could see it being active in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, 2000s, and now it's just finding more ways to be PR relevant. And it's always been like in the tens of thousands, and it's been there. And it's not eradicated because there's freedom of speech laws here, which you don't see in Europe. Fletcher says, I think the American let me say, I think the American alt-right is more anti-Semitic simply because a larger presence of Jews in America. That's also part of it. Larger presence, larger prominence, and larger importance of Jews in the American context relative to the European context.
Yeah, I think with the last part, I definitely agree. And I would say, to your other point, I would disagree somewhat. I mean, Europeans also post World War had a big anti-Semitic right-wing tradition. I mean, even the Swedish Democrats, for example, came from a Nazi party, right? So yeah, I would disagree there. I would say, yeah, it would. There is a strong element of the Jewish population is more prominent. But I think there's something else. I think there's also a way of how people see Jewish identity in the United States, as opposed to how people see Jewish identity in Europe. And I think the
Yeah,
way
you've
that
talked about
people
that before, but I don't think there's as much to it as you've said.
you don't think people are more screaming more about the fact that there are Jews in America.
I think that there are a lot more Jewish organizations in America, right? Because there are a lot more Jews in America, and they're much more organized in America. But I don't think that, you know, if you had a similarly active group of Jews in Europe, their Jewishness wouldn't be similarly salient. I think there would be a similar salience
Well,
to it.
all right. So, do you know of your friends that they're Jews or not?
Well, often not until late, and certainly not in high school. But in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, recent acquisitions, they've been people who talk about politics, and so yeah, I know whether they're Jewish or not. That's a lot more. That comes to the fore a lot more in kind of political conversations, particularly now that the alt right has become so prominent. I never really heard this before, but I had a Jewish friend who was talking about, basically talking about anti-Semitism and his concerns about it and his fear of it. And that's not a conversation I'd ever had in my youth or in my life previously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just always. I mean, my Jewish friends, like how I find out is like somebody's calling me over Christmas that I wanna like if you wanna get a drink, and then I'm like, fuck no, I'm with my parents celebrating Christmas, like stuff like that. And
Jews
you
here
know, talked
celebrate
about it for
Christmas,
5 years.
so maybe they're more integrated. We
Well,
celebrate
no,
Christmas.
well, his mom became particularly Jewish late in life. So that for him it's more of an exception, but many Jews just don't celebrate Christmas as well in Holland, of course. But it's just that people never say that they are. I just never notice people say I'm Jewish.
Oh, by the way,
on the 5th of July, 2016, Juno successfully.
Fletcher, you posted Saturday Night Live. I can't play Saturday Night Live for long on the channel. It'll probably be shut down for copyright infringement. Sorry, Conops. I didn't. I was paying attention to the YouTube video, not to you. So could you repeat yourself? And I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, I just never noticed that they were Jewish until that moment.
Oh, okay, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I don't know what I see from American TV, and it's not just the Jewish thing; it's also the Greek thing, or like I'm from this heritage or that heritage, and people are very busy with their identity
But it's
because it's
trivia.
some kind of
It's not taken terribly.
subnational
I think it's
identity.
taken far more seriously in Europe. Honestly, that heritage stuff. It's just that in America, it's a fun thing to talk about. It's like a fun diversion to talk about it. It's not taken terribly seriously. It's just an interesting bit of trivia to pass the time, like an icebreaker. It's not much
Well, but
importance
in
is
Europe, you
attached to
have
it.
to in Europe you have to culturally assimilate as well. If you're going to a new country, and even if you're an Italian, you're coming to Holland or whatever, you have to culturally assimilate. Otherwise, you're not really part of the crowd. And I think in America, what you do is you get your old identity and subsume it into your new identity. And I think that is a difference. So you have this part like I am Greek and I'm proud of that, and then I'm America, which is my primary political identity. But the cultural identity stays, at least for I don't know a few generations, stays very from the country that you were born in. In Europe, we don't have that patience for that kind of subnational identity, I would say.
Yeah, but America does seem to assimilate more successfully than Europe does.
No, also because they leave more room for people's how would you say ethnic identities, perhaps, because there's less you have to give up, in a sense.
Right. Yeah. So, have your views on American politics changed at all over the past few months?
Well, not so much, I would say. I think Trump is still a demagogue, unlike people in these circles. I see him as a sign of American decline as well.
Did you see? How would you rank American presidents, like, or recent presidents, or actually any presidents that you like? Like, who do you think was really good?
Who? Then we have to go far back, I would say. I think I like Clinton.
You like the Kosovo intervention?
I think, yeah, I'm not so sure about the Kosovo intervention, but I think ultimately it was a good thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty against that intervention. I think it was needlessly alienating to Russia, and obviously
we paid a heavy
alienating to the Serbs.
price. We paid a heavy price, but on the other hand, I don't know if a free, how would you say, like if you leave an aggressive movement that also commits like horrible crimes of humanity so close to the European mainland, you never know what kind of consequences that would
But
have
look at
later
what the
on.
consequences of Kosovo's independence. The Kosovars are doing a lot of very shady stuff, and I think that the security risk is far greater than it would have been with Serbian nationalists holding that territory. But you know, people can disagree
Yeah, but we
on this.
don't know how that would have played out.
Why do you think that
That's the
Europe is
problem.
such a backwater compared to America?
Like, what do you mean in backwater?
An economic backwater, a military backwater, a cultural backwater, basically
Well,
coasting on
Europe
America's wake. Why is that?
Europe is very diverse, I would say. So it really
America's even
depends
more
what kind of-
diverse in certain senses, right?
No, that's not true. So especially the old Iron Curtain countries.
There's less ethnic
and
differences
the
in Europe,
Balkans.
but there's less genetic diversity in Europe, but they're way
That's true.
more butthurt about it.
Cultural,
Way more butthurt, like
well,
1,000
but
times
there are
more
very
butthurt about it.
profound historical differences in Europe, right? So we don't have a common
Maybe they needed
identity.
Napoleon to win. Maybe they needed
Sorry?
Napoleon. Maybe they needed Napoleon to win and just take over the continent for it to end up a united bloc. All those centuries ago.
Hitler. That's what people say about Hitler, Kyle.
Yeah, but Hitler had no chance,
Yeah,
bro.
that's true.
Hitler had no
No,
chance.
Napoleon shouldn't have won. I think that the problem. I actually like European diversity. I think it's nice if you go from one place to another. It looks very different. People are
I
very
wish
different.
Europeans cooperated less, because their cooperations are even more gay than their countries. Like, if you look at their
What?
cooperations, like, there's some really impressive stuff that comes out of their independent, activities. Like some French R&D was super impressive. But when they get together in these amalgamations, I mean, it's just fuck. It's just so uninspiring. I have to say. So
I would
uninspiring.
agree. I think European glory was always because of competitiveness.
Yeah.
That started with the Italian city-states. They competed with each other, and then they created great things. Then with all the individual European nation-states, also did great. So I think, Europe was great because people competed, and I think the European Union is a problem exactly because it actually eliminates that competition.
It doesn't quite eliminate it, but yeah, I feel like it's almost a spiritual problem. Like, they don't regard themselves as being viable. Like, there used to be a time when the French would stand up in front of anybody and they'd say, "Fuck you. We're French. God damn it. You can go to hell. We're as good as anyone." But that spirit is lost.
Yeah, well, it's a bit. I mean, it depends if you're talking about Eastern Europe or Western Europe.
Eastern Europe
I
is
think
more like this, but unfortunately, basically, in large part, a bunch of fucking beggars who need to be kind of on the suckle on the teat of Western Europe in order to be viable, and so that really cucks them a lot, right? Like, what happens to fucking Poland if it doesn't have European markets? Like, it becomes a lot more similar to the rest of Eastern Europe, and they're not willing to pay that price. Russia is interesting. Russia is, in a lot of ways a shithole, but also, has a sort of independent drive.
Russia is really a shithole, and it still prides itself on that it was once an empire.
It has that pride, and it has a little bit of that interesting, bite to it.
Yeah, but the problem, their demographics are terrible. I mean, they're much worse than in the rest of Europe. So they can scream all they want, or they can try to have and manage the political clout that they still have, but actually, it's not anything anymore. It's how would you say? It's become a paper tiger. It looks good from the outside, but from the inside, it's rotting. It's basically a corpse that pretends that it's still alive.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, its demographic situation is bad, but just keeping in mind its raw base population, it's in a pretty decent position. It's in a downward spiraling position, but still, like, it's a lot of dudes, and they got some moxie to them. They got some fire in their bellies. But I wish they had more.
If you look at countries like Sweden or countries like Holland or whatever, they have a much better birth rate. 1.6, 1.7.
Yeah, but they're from a much smaller base. Yeah. But yeah, I agree that the birth rate is atrocious, and it makes a point. It makes a point about something that one of my biggest pet peeves with the right is how they try to say, "Oh, well, if it weren't for this global homo stuff, everything would be fine. It would be great." No, fuck you. Look at fucking Japan. Look at fucking China. No global homo. No fucking. They're fucking culturally on the right. They're culturally conservative. Look at Russia, culturally conservative. Look at Eastern Europe, culturally conservative. Guess what? No fucking births, my dude.
Yeah.
Fucking shit numbers. So we
Very true.
gotta solve the problem some other fucking way. You're not gonna I'm gonna throw out the gays and then poof, suddenly utopia. Wrong, bitch. Wrong. Not how it fucking works. You're not fucking thinking.
Yeah, that's why I want to combine Sweden with Hungary. I think that would be the ultimate country for me.
Well, that's some European talk, because I got no fucking idea what happens when you combine Sweden and Hungary. I have no fucking idea.
Look, like, you have Viktor Orban and his, stance on immigration and his, the cultural pride, and then you have Sweden with the nice daycare stuff and also, I don't know, like the things that are not so strict, and
Sweden has a decent birth rate, I think, right? Sweden has like almost exactly the birth rate of like a little bit above the birth rate of America. I was looking at that recently, looking at those birth rate numbers, as you do.
Yeah.
Birth rates, as they say.
Yeah, it's good to check these things. Because I think the alt-right makes so many just basic bitch mistakes.
Absolutely
Oh,
fucking
yes, Russia.
dog shit errors that make no fucking logical sense. They're not thinking, man. They're not thinking. And that's I don't know. Like this obsession. The obsession with homosexuality is so silly. It's so fucking silly. And the obsession with...
Oh, Kyle, we had a gay on the panel yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hilarious because Brundlefly was on, and he couldn't stop himself. And there were a few guys, semi-converts to Islam, the white Sharia guys on. And
Goddamn,
it's
the
just
white
their
Sharia
obsession.
shit. By the way, the
Yeah.
fucking non-white Sharia is also collapsing. Like the fucking the women in the Middle East are getting rights and getting rights fairly quickly. Like you're gonna have knockoff Sharia and you think that'll protect you? You know, fuck.
Yeah, and,
God damn.
And also, I mean, it's like these people can think that they can uninvent the pill or something. They can stop.
Fletcher says
technology.
feminism is the key problem. In a lot of ways, I think that's true. I think that feminism is much closer to the bullseye. But there has to be a change in both culture and in economics that enables people to have children in like a serious way, particularly on the top. You know.
Yeah. I always say, like, why if they're for example talking, we were gonna ban the pill, or they're talking about. Yeah, well, I don't know, like executing feminists or whatever, because people are not staying together, or what do you have as well, like marriage contracts, like make divorce impossible. And I'm saying, like, dude, at the moment now, there's a lot of economic stuff that you can do, that you can raise the birth rates. I mean, basically, people now are 25 or 30, 100,000 euros in debt. You can't sustain a family like that. You won't stop or start a family at that moment. You'll start it later or not. So all these like micro solutions that we could have are not thought about, and people are just going for the really heavy, strong things because they're, I don't know, there's something in their character that likes sort of absolutist solutions.
They want to make a splash, man. They want to fight back. And they also want to hurt people, to be fucking frank. A lot of them are sadists. A lot of them are antisocial.
Oh, we had these white, these white Sharia guys that were on the panel yesterday. So I have now a big war with Madame Claire Call. You know her, right? Yeah. So basically, these white Sharia guys were on, and one of the guys says, we are gonna rape your women, and I'm happy the Pakistani guys are gonna rape your women, stuff like that. And
fucking children. They're fucking children.
Yeah. But also there is like a border of psychopathy. There's something like
there's some weird fucked up thing going on in their heads, man. They got some disordered thinking going
also
on.
Like there are people who have like social issues or I don't know, mental issues that assemble in these movements.
Check.
And then they found their outlet because the ideology really fits the personality.
Yep. It's for so many of them, it's just a way to fulfill either sadistic or self-effacing or some kind of weird fucked up urge, and it's just disgusting.
And they're so honest.
There's
about
really
it. So
not enough focus on that.
Yeah. So this guy said like, I want to rape. I feel like we should go to war, and I can't wait for war, and we should rape their women once we can actually fight.
Fletcher says,
he actually has some
this is why I'm libertarian. Wait, let me read Fletcher. Fletcher says, this is why I'm libertarian. Ultimately, the state subsidizes women's terrible decisions. I want a Darwinian cultural correction, which libertarianism offers. I have some thoughts along those lines as well. I think that some of the problem is perpetuated by subsidizing people's bad decisions, and but I orient not on punishing people who are down on their luck, but rather on helping people who have things put together understand the value of having children, and also actually get rewarded for it in proportion to the value that it brings, or in some proportion to the value that it brings. And that can be done in a libertarian way. That can be done in a way that respects property rights. Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah, there needs to be people who are serious, people who understand that you're not going to make anything with a bunch of mentally ill freaks. You're not going to make anything with a bunch of marginalized losers. You're going to make something with people who want to build, people who are serious about building.
Yeah, and not people that just want to destroy. It's like that kid that's like in a place where you can kick the windows in and nobody's watching. You know that? These old buildings.
Yep.
When you're like a little kid and you can see that there's already like one window broken.
Yep.
And then you take a big brick and you throw the rest in, right? I mean, that's
broken
that
windows
kind of
theory
behavior.
needs to be used by these fucking communities if they want to succeed. Fletcher says disincentives work better than incentives. I don't know about that. I don't know about that kind of thinking. I think that the incentive side has to be applied so much more than it is.
But by the way, if you want to hear a rant of a white Sharia guy, uncensored, I think Jenny has a link to a very interesting video. Then you can actually see what their psychology is.
Mm-hmm.
Are you interested?
Not sure for now. I think the stream. Oh, Jen sent me a link on Twitter.
No, it brings a lot of interesting. You can actually see uncensored how they think. Have you ever heard?
Let me check my Twitter messages.
Brundlefly?
Let's see what we got on Twitter messages. Copy link address and go to the NASA video place. What's going on? Oh, am I fucking? Oh my god! I hate streaming. There we go. I didn't even mean to leak anything. But luckily my DMs are boring. Fucking. Warning: this video exceeds your sensitivity preference. Okay. Normal. Yeah, god damn it. This is the hateful thing about streaming is how you have to keep in mind. I'm not used to it, so I don't keep in mind my OPSEC. Best thing is just not to ever say anything that you don't want revealed in any circumstances.
I'd like to ask Ego Jake a few questions, if I may.
Yeah, but I have more money than you, so what?
Yeah. I cannot stand. It's just infuriating that I don't want to see how inferior you are to me. Well, it's good.
This is some Richard Spencer stuff, so I'm not necessarily gonna play the whole video, but you see this stuff. I don't want to see how inferior you are to me. Reminds you of how much better I am. I'm better than you because I'm not you, and you're inferior, and you're some passive little shit. So we have a right to dominate and abuse you and make you our slave. Right, this is exactly the sort of thing that fucking Richard Spencer said. Like, exactly that fucking shit. Exactly that shit.
Yeah.
Chinese name asks, why does Kyle look like Moldbug? Because I am Moldbug, my dude. I'm Curtis Yarvin. Unmasked. I'm Curtis Yarvin. Here to fuck shit up. But hopefully I don't look like Curtis Yarvin, actually, because I don't think that Curtis Yarvin is the best of lookers. Not that I hold that against him.
Do you think that you look like or you talk like Shapiro?
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't know. I think I'm a bit of a motor mouth. Man. Yeah, I got the fast talking.
Do you think it's an advantage, or do you think people get?
It's absolutely an advantage. Yeah, it does help you because and I don't try to use it that way. But if you can talk faster than someone else, or at the limit of their understanding, then it makes it a lot harder for them to respond in real time. And it just makes you, it lets you get in more hits in the discussion.
Oh, but that's true. But that is of course not very fair, is it?
No, but on the other hand, yeah, it certainly would be disingenuous to use that to try to get an advantage. But on the other hand, I'm not going to slow myself down for the sake of fairness. I don't think that makes sense. But yeah, like I think.
Well, but people on the outside can see it, of course. I mean, people can see that you're making 5 or 6 points at the same time, and that you're trying to confuse your opponent.
No. I'm not trying to confuse them. I'm raising all these points, and all these points are surface area that they can attack if they have a good counter argument, right?
Yeah, but the problem is if you throw in 5 points, and there's only time for one person to respond to 1 or 2 points of that, people can see like, he's actually employing this as a strategy.
Yeah, the question of whether it's disingenuous simply depends on the viability of those points, and it also, like, often when I'm raising a bunch of points, it's in response to someone's claim. So it's a lot harder to refute a claim than it is to actually make it, and so it often requires that you say a lot more words than they said to make the claim to refute the claim. And that's a lot of where I talk really fast, and I raise a lot of points. It's like, well, this is wrong because of reasons A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah, that's true. But also, I think if you make a lot of points at the same time, they sometimes get lost.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I do try to be intellectually honest. I try to advance positions that I believe in, and I try to make sure that I address points that I think are relevant.
Yeah, I was
And
quite. I
I'd
was
also
quite
say that
suspicious when you said to Brundlefly that you actually turned his volume down while you were speaking with him.
Well, I muted my computer because he was talking while I was talking, and I was like, I don't want to deal with that. This was like during. This was not during a debate. This was like during a complete shit fest where we were just basically trying to out yell and out hurt the other, right? Outscore the other, but not in like a productive way. And that's where things have degenerated to with me and Brundlefly at this point, I think, and probably indefinitely, because he's made the mistake of saying that he views himself as a bully and someone who dominates conversations. And it's if you bill yourself as that, then I'm gonna fuck you. I'm gonna fuck you, real hard. Okay.
Yeah, but also I think you're both people who don't back down easily.
Yeah,
that's the problem. I think I've never look. The Brundlefly has, in my opinion, moderated over the last year. He's become
well,
more...
his position, the position that he was taking last year, or not exactly last year, but I think like more like 2/3 of a year ago, has become untenable, I think, in his view. Like he seems to have moderated his he's moderated his political position, whereas mine has only become stronger. The position that I initially came in with has become much more opinionated, and it is in large part, something that like along the lines of Luke Ford's criticism. Like when I was looking into the alt-right and stuff, I came across Luke Ford and Luke Ford's critique, and it was like bang on the money in a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways, I'm advancing that critique further. And then Kaufman's as well. And
Brundlefly moderate.
Go ahead, Mike.
Huh?
Brundlefly is basically one step below the siege gnats or the wig gnats as far as his.
Well,
Brundlefly is moderated in the following way. He's become
moderated.
He's become a lot less sure of the victory of his side, and he's become a lot more demoralized. Or at least that when I last saw him. I don't know what his position is exactly now. He could have reinvigorated.
I think the interaction with the Wignats made him.
Yeah, they talk about gassing his child, right? So at that point, you have to kind of recognize how fucked up the situation is.
Yeah, and the fact that they didn't give any love back was also, and I think also just the sociopathy and the really strange things you see if you go on a Bateman stream or used to be on the OV stream as well. There's just a level of aggression and murderous rage that we
So I recall him saying Kyle has a Mott and Bailey. Like there's a core of truth to what Kyle is saying, but he's expanding it way beyond its application. There are these core Wignats who are totally antisocial, but Kyle is spreading that out where it doesn't belong. And my take is, yeah, I'm spreading it out where it does belong, motherfucker. Because people who tolerate that kind of shit and don't differentiate from that kind of shit are that kind of shit. And that's just reality.
Yeah, but
whether you
I
like
don't
it or
think
not.
he's a total crazy person. I think
No,
that's
definitely not.
where you get anti-Semitism wrong. I mean, it is, yes, it is predominantly very visible in people who are not very socially apt or something. But I think as a normal person, you can also just be convinced by the ideas.
Join my Discord. Join my Discord. Join my Discord. Join my Discord, chat cucks. Join it.
Everyone join
Click the link.
Discord.
I want people to join my Discord. Okay. So Conops. Yeah, I think people can be convinced by it, and moreover, they can see. This is not like a question that is objectively answerable. If you see Jews as being an enemy, if you see them as a rival that you need to counter, then everything follows from that, right? There is this spiraling escalation that happens, and it makes sense based on that take, based on that and in some sense it's like I think I said it like a year ago or something. It's like there's no objective way in which you have to like any group of people any more than you have to like a peanut butter sandwich or like vanilla ice cream, right? There's no objective reason why you have to like versus dislike a group. And if you decide, well, I dislike this group and I don't want this group to have influence, well, then you're put in the position of combat. Tadam123 says, is Kyle Jewish? The answer is yes, but also it's complicated.
Well, but how do people start to dislike a group? I think that is a better question then.
Well, I've talked about this. Like, there are commonalities between the way that Jews are hated and the way that Indians in Uganda are hated, the way that Tutsis in Tutsis in Rwanda were hated, the way that Igbo in Nigeria were hated, the way that Chinese in Malaysia were hated. Anytime you have a higher IQ group embedded in a lower IQ group, you have a situation where resentment boils over. That's pretty much ubiquitous. Wherever you see like a large IQ differential, you see differentials in success, and that's people don't think, oh, they're so successful because of how much smarter they are. They think, oh, they're so much successful because of how crafty and evil and scheming they are. That's a natural human thought that arises.
Well, I given this some thought actually, and I don't think it's just because of a high IQ. I think there's also something that has to do with ethnic networks.
Right, but this sort of thing happens every time. So you can also see the same arguments with Chinese in Malaysia. They say, well, the Chinese.
But you can make those same arguments. I can make those same arguments with ethnic networks as well. So what ends up happening is that people of a certain group that have a friend network, right? So how do you get a job? You always get a job mostly of the time by your fin, right? So you know somebody.
So
who knows somebody.
This entire line of thought, in my view, is deprecated by various experiments. So there's a question: is it the case that you succeed on the basis of your individual merit, or is it because of your connections? And broadly speaking, experiments tend to show that it's due to your individual merit. When you give people a leg up artificially, what tends to happen is that it fades out.
This is one of your problems. You have a problem letting people talk.
Yeah, you can just respond to what I said.
Yeah, but I could also finish my point. So. Basically, so it's your fin network, which means that you know somebody who knows somebody, and then you get a job, right? So
and as I've asserted, there are experiments that probe that relationship.
Wait. If you're a higher IQ group, right? So it is of course true that most of that will probably be because of merit, but there's also something, especially if you're a minority, it will be watched. So You don't see that, for example, many professions are dominated by certain groups.
Yeah, there are specializations, but that does not actually equate to there being an advantage to that specialization, merely to there being that specialization in the first place. It may be a disadvantage or an advantage.
You really think, so for example, people that work in social work or where I live in Amsterdam happen to be, most of the time, especially if they have to do with finances, they happen to be black.
Right.
I mean, that's not a merit thing.
You see, for example, Indians with drugstores and 7-Elevens, right? It's like way more than could happen through coincidence. But that does not mean that it's an advantage to them that they have this specialization.
Yes, but specialization is not just a phenomenon of I open a shop and it's in our culture to open a shop, but it's also We know each other.
Yeah.
And
all that happens.
I like to have somebody.
There's
I
no
know
reason to think that it's some kind of
connection
huge
with.
advantage.
And it's not just I like to have a connection with. It's also the person that you just do have a connection with. So
but there's no reason to think
that
people who do that, who take that path, do better than they would have done just by going out on their own. Right? It's not clear that they make more money.
Yeah, of course they would, but that's a classic correlation causation mistake.
So what I would say is that we can try to assess how much is network effects and how much is individual merit by looking at things like lotteries, where people get into high-class schools or not. And in the case where they get into the high-class schools, well, then they build relationships with people who are successful, right? And people who are on average going to be a lot more successful. And what you find is that, much to people's surprise, there's actually very little difference, and sometimes it's even in the wrong direction, between the people who won the lottery and those who lost the lottery. Okay? So overall, people overestimate the effect of nepotism. I'm going to say this very carefully. Obviously, you can be successful in a certain field a lot easier if you have an existing network in that field. But that does not mean that you gain some sort of magical success advantage over what you would have done in just the whole space of possibilities that you would have had if you just went your own way. What this tends to show...
It's not about success. It's just the fact that you're there. I mean, it is the fact that you have these connections, that you come into contact with people that are in the same profession.
Chris Alton says specialization has more to do with networking than IQ. Yeah, no shit, Chris Alton. So like Indians don't own drugstores and 7-Elevens so disproportionately because they network well. And by the way, I don't even know if that's true, but presuming that it's true, it's not because they have the exact right IQ level in order to get into that field. It's that they specialized in that field. And so you'd see a similar thing with other overrepresentation cases.
Yeah. No, fair enough. I'm not saying like all nepotism is even conscious. We might not even call it nepotism, but it's networks. So it's just people you know.
So these networks exist,
you in a certain
but we don't even know that these networks make you richer. Well, okay. In the case of finance, right?
But that's not relevant. It's not relevant if they make you richer. In fact, do you get a job? Are you in that profession? Stuff like that.
Do you get a job? Is a richer question. The question is, do you get a job in that field? You know, you tend to find your level of success whatever field you go into. So, you know, just because you wouldn't have been able to get a job in that field doesn't mean that you wouldn't succeed elsewhere. And so what we tend to see is that people who like artificially are denied an opportunity tend to still find their level some other way. So it's mostly your own level, your own level of drive, your intelligence, your ability to go out and get things done that decides your success, right? And that's a fact.
Mostly. I don't know. I think they're both very important factors.
If they were both very important factors, then what we would see is that there'd be a big difference between the person who gets into the elite school and the person who doesn't on a random coin flip, right? You see a big difference in their incomes.
Yeah, true. Like in Europe, we don't have the same admission policy, so I wouldn't know much about that.
I believe that some of these experiments were done in the UK.
Yeah, but I think some of these things, right? Some of these questions are more more merit based, for example. So like I don't believe that Harvard really thinks, oh, he's a Jew as well, he's a Jew, let's hire him. I don't think it works like that. But I think in many jobs it might work like that. Much more subtly. More subtly, like not.
But to the extent that you make market irrational.
Happens to know it, and he happens to be Jewish, but you wouldn't know him if you weren't Jewish, because then he wouldn't be your uncle.
To the extent that you make market irrational choices, it does hurt your success and the success of the person that you're hiring. Not in the sense that like, oh, you're doing them a huge amount of damage, but in the sense that if they're less suited to the position, they're going to find less reward in that position, because in general the rewards do follow in some proportion to the value that you add. So if someone is kind of feckless and you put them into a position they never would have got except for their except for their connections, it's usually going to be the case that they don't get the same rewards from that position as someone who was a real winner who was put into that same position. That's what I'm saying. That effect is strong.
Yeah, but the problem is with many positions, it's that somebody is just marginally better than another one, right? So it's not. It's not that people are going to be fired or not going to be like very less successful. So you wouldn't know so much if these things matter so much. If it's really if somebody's there on merit, somebody's there because of a network situation.
Well, sure, but if it was overall the case that success was due to networking, we'd see different results in the experiments that we've run. That's all.
No, well, that's true, and I think these things are both very important. And I think sometimes what the HBD crowd does is exaggerate IQ to something that's untenable. And it's also, I mean, the literature.
Our view of the importance of nature is not based on some arbitrary feeling, but based on the surprising results that have been generated whenever we try to quantize the relative importance of these different factors. And so it's a surprising result.
Oh, yeah,
it's a counterintuitive result.
A lot of other factors. And Luke Ford
you can understand.
Says, IQ is so important because it's more. It gives you. It's more. What is it? More a metric of success than a fucking job interview. Well, if something is a bad metric of success, it's a fucking job interview. So it's not quite that good. It's just less bad than the others.
Yeah, the point is that somehow it works out because you do see, on the broad scale, that your roll of the dice does depend primarily on your traits. Okay? So yeah, there are a lot of unfair processes that are involved here, but at a certain point it has to be the case that in most cases or in enough cases, the driving force is your own merit. Right? Despite all the unfairness that we know about, in some sense it has to work out fairly, or at least it has to be fairly meritocratic. And we're talking about Western capitalistic systems here. There is a certain forcing function towards efficiency.
Yeah, well, but here I have a problem as well. I mean, I think more and more our elites are not very meritocratic anymore. I think in the 60s that was definitely the case when everybody went from, how would you say, just a lower class or a middle class background. They went to school and then they went to university. But I think these networks now married with each other, there's a common culture. The kids go to university. If the kids can't pay for it, they'll get extra schooling. So it's not a very fair base. Like
I think it's actually probably the opposite. I think that we're seeing more effective stratification as people get sort of centrifuged out to their meritocratic positions. Broadly speaking, I think that the rich is more deserving now than it ever was. Actually.
Yes and no. In some ways, the old hierarchies are destroyed, so that makes it more fair. But on the other hand, there's a new hierarchy coming up. I was think about my city of Amsterdam. So in the in the golden age, the 17th century, like people invested a lot, and there was a lot of activity, and there was a lot of trade and a lot of money made. But in the 18th century, people started to rentier. They started not to spend their money anymore, and people sat on their money. And as a consequence, like people gave their jobs to their friends. It was no activity anymore, and that's one of the reasons why we lost the pole position of the most important trading place in the world.
Yeah, I'm not so sure of that analysis.
Is corrupt.
I'm not so sure
of
that
analysis. Well, we can see this. Can I give you some numbers?
Sure.
So you can just see for the 18th that out
I
of
didn't hear that.
the occupations
See for the what?
there used to be.
See for the what?
For the 18th century in the Golden Age in the Netherlands, there were many more rentiers than in the 17th century. Like on a factor to the other work, it was 50-fold or something. Yeah. And then you see decline. So you see that hierarchies.
It just seems like it's hard to analyze things. It's so hard to analyze things once you're going that far back, in terms of like embryonic economies.
No, it's actually not. How is it? I mean, I'm not saying it.
Talking about 1600s, like the 1600s economy was I mean radically different
No, but it's just it's much more easy because you can actually look at the professions that people have, and you can see that in the 18th century there was a lot of rentiers, and in the 17th century there were not a lot of rentiers, and people were primarily traders and didn't sit on their money. So you can actually see how it works if hierarchies become corrupt and established for a long time.
At some point, it'll be interesting to do some streams on the history of your country. I presume you're talking about your country. That would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it was an economic miracle, but I just feel that that you overestimate what merit really does, and you underestimate how people are where they are because of the accident that they were born, cultural group.
Well, that would be fun, and that used to be what I thought, because it's a very fun thing to think, because it excuses a lot of what would otherwise be unconscionable behavior and very fun behavior. But as it happens, I just think it's wrong. I just think it's factually wrong.
Why is it fun to think that?
Because it gives you an excuse to light the torch. Gives you an excuse to say
the problem
pound their
is
skulls
how
in.
I think about it, that cultures and social cliques are not very easily. So it's not like you have a cultural group and you say, oh, "Wow, we'll just give them affirmative action and then it will be okay." No, especially I would say in the black community in the United States, these cultural problems are so persistent.
Incidentally, do you believe in HBD at all, or are you like a full culture explanation guy? I'll take that as a no. You're HBD agnostic. Well, folks, sooner or later there's going to be the conversion of con-ops. The red pilling of con-ops will commence at some point. Operation Red Pill con-ops.
Well,
all right, it's getting late. It's getting late, folks.
Okay.
Con-ops, this was a fun conversation.
All right.
Stream, this was a fun conversation.
All right.
I'm so glad you guys could come. Join my Discord.
And...
You fuckers. Join my Discord. Join my Discord. Join my Discord. I'm going to post the link and spam it. I'm going to make this a thing.
All right. Ciao, ciao.
Good night. Good night, bro. Good night. Yeah, this was totally fun. This was a great stream. And I was surprised that I actually got more viewers with debate than I did with reviewing Ben Shapiro's 21,000 viewers stream. I remember I had like 21 viewers and he had 21,000 viewers, and I was like, wow. But then I got like 26 viewers just chatting with my Discord. That's great. That's some great energy there, boys. That's some great energy. This is European, by the way. Tadam123. It's European. Russian, no, but it's European. Genuine European plastic. Only the finest plastic from Europe. All right. Bye-bye. I'm out.